Sheila Johnson, thank you for coming to the 3050 Summit.
This is just such an honor. You have no idea.
The honor is ours. You have so many titles to your name. You are a founder, you are a musician, a philanthropist, the owner of sports teams, to a degree that no other Black woman in the U.S. has reached. You also wrote a book in which you write about your life and you write about your philosophy of running businesses. And one of the things that really stood out to me was your entrepreneurial instincts were there even in your 20s, well before you reached where you are now.
Yes.
How do you think you honed those business instincts?
I think it's really believing in people. So many people, it's really funny because I was visiting with Kara Swisher, who has her book that just came out, and she was talking about how entrepreneurs start out and then suddenly they become successful, very successful, and they go from the Levi set to the cashmere set. And they just kind of lose touch with people. And I think one of the things I know, because I really do believe in people and really trying to bring people along. You know, and it's all about leadership. You can lead any company, but what kind of leader are you really going to be? Are you going to be an empathetic leader or a mentoring type leader? Domineering leader? I like to be a leader that really inspires my employees. And I've mentioned this before. I call it HARP. It's about being honest, authentic, respectful, and passionate. And to be able to clearly be able to communicate to my employees my vision of how I want to grow my company. And I have to teach them and work with them on how to buy into that. And you have to be very careful with whom you hire, because if they come in with their own agenda, you don't want to keep them. They need to buy into the vision and into the teamwork and be able to work as a team to help you build your company.
And you've had experience with people who had their own agenda.
Oh, yes.
Early days of one company, you even caught someone stealing.
Yes. So the philosophy there is you hire slowly and you fire fast.
Hire slowly, fire fast.
Yes.
That's good advice. You've also shown the ability to have a remarkable commitment to the long-term vision, while other people might be tempted for the short term, optimizing for the short term. You write about the BET IPO and what some people, and like your co-founder, wanted to do with the company.
Right.
And you had a different vision. How did you manage to stick to that vision and convince others that what you wanted to do was the right path?
Well, I'm not sure if I was able during that time to convince them. I just knew what I needed to do and the value system that needed to be built within the company. Some people didn't believe in it. My co-founder didn't believe in it. And it was a case where even when you're doing an IPO, because our IPO didn't last very long, there was not enough patience to really understand how to grow the company and have the patience to make it work. There are too many people that are always interested in the bottom line and how they're going to make money fast. And when you do that, the money doesn't last very long. So you've got to be very strategic on how you want to grow the company. And there were just so many mistakes that I could see that were happening, like not really identifying the ages that we really wanted to strategically hit with our programming. So our programming never could grow. And because of that, we got into the video market way too fast because MTV did not want to promote black videos at all. That was a door that opened. That was great. But let's stick to the value system. I didn't like what I was seeing on the screen. And that's when I then decided to do a show called Teen Summit to really teach young people about smart TV watching. And that's what was really important to me.
You were overlooked and discounted and ignored as a co-founder of BET for so long. But then in your third act, you've come into your own as an entrepreneur. You have such a successful hotel line property.
Yeah.
How have you been able to overcome those days of being overlooked?
I think it was a case with the help of therapy and my mother. where they reminded me that I did have what it would take to build another company. I think when you're in an abusive relationship, you have no idea how you lose sense of yourself. And I was losing sense of myself, and I didn't have the security within myself to even think about what I needed to do. I lost belief in myself. I didn't know who I was. And then slowly, once I got out of a toxic relationship, I was then able to rebuild my life. And it took time and lots of help from a good doctor, and was able to then really strategically put together a path in which I needed to start going on. Mm-hmm. And when I decided, I've had no intentions of going in the hotel business, and I knew nothing about it. But what I did know, what I had to do, if that was what I was going to do, I needed to hire the smartest people out there. And they had to be smarter than me. Mm. And I was going to learn from them. And the fine line that and I still every day work on this, the fine line is you hire smarter people, but you don't want them to overtake you and take you for granted. You know what I'm saying?
I was going to ask you that. It's a tricky balance.
It's a very tricky balance. And I think part of it is I had the power of finance, which they did not have. And also, I was able to communicate my vision. And they really bought into my vision. And because of that, we're probably one of the most successful luxury hotel companies out there. Mm-hmm. We're recognized by Forbes. We won this award last week. Our hotel in Middleburg is one of 13 in the world to receive 15 stars. And all of our other hotels are Forbes 4 stars. So as I told the company, I said, okay, don't sit back on your laurels. We have got to keep those 15 stars, and we've got to work on the rest of the resorts to get the 5 stars. Wow. So we are very wedded to Forbes, to the training. I've actually sat in on the training myself to understand what it takes to get the Forbes awards. And that's important. I was learning the whole time, but still able to communicate what I wanted. And I knew my design. I knew exactly what I want the hotels to look like. I picked the furniture out. I've designed linens. I do all of that, but that's all from my arts background. So all of that has built in to where my vision takes me.
There are so many details in the book that illustrate the ways in which you've invested in yourself. And this is a small detail relative to the other important lessons, but you used your own art collection to decorate your property.
Oh, yes.
And I just thought that was so fitting. It felt so full circle because these were pieces you had invested in.
Yes.
With a property that you had to fight the local municipality, you had to negotiate, you had to be strategic. And then when it came time to decorate it, you were looking at your own art collection.
Yes, and there were times when I, wanted to cut the budget a little bit. So I did all my own photography. The photography's in all of the rooms. And as you get off the elevators, there's my work there. So I've done even my own personal work. And I designed the linens. And I made the mistake. They were all coming out of Italy. And I said, I can't keep this up. I got to go on a cheaper route. But the same design is still in the linens. It's just that I use another manufacturer.
Do guests realize that it's your photography?
Oh, they know.
Oh, they know.
Because I sign it.
Okay. You are proud of your name.
Yes.
As you should be.
Absolutely.
I love sports, and I've mentioned this to you multiple times, but I think the fact that you own stakes in 3 professional sports leagues in the U.S. is remarkable. Quite literally, there is no other Black woman who can say the same. Can you talk about how it was that you came to do that and why it was important for you to get involved in this arena? Because you could have stuck to the arts.
I know. I think this is kind of serendipitous in the sense that I became friends with the original owner of the Capitals and the Wizards and the Mystics. I was always friends and respected this man, and it's all in the book.
Yeah, you got an interesting call from your ex saying, don't do this to me.
Don't do this to me. Because he wanted to on the
I know.
teams. So what had happened, he really disrespected Abe Pollin. Abe Pollin was very gracious. He never reacted, but he never forgot. So one day he called me and he says, I want you to be the face of the Washington Mystics. And I said, what do you mean by being the face of? He says, I'd like you to own it. I said, but the Mystics doesn't make money. And he said, but look, I'm giving you an opportunity. And I said, I'm not turning it down. Give me the financials. He says, please make up your mind soon. I then called my lawyer and I said, I've just been offered a sports team. And he says, you should not buy a sports team. I said, if you were in that position and if you were offered a sports team, what would you do? And he got very quiet. I said, you just answered my question. I said, now I want you to get Ted Leonsis on the phone, and I have the money. I want to buy into the Wizards, the basketball NBA team, and the hockey team. And I want to be a really substantial partner. And so I was able to do that. And eventually Ted named me vice chairman of Monumental Sports. He's chairman, I'm vice chairman. And I've been a very active partner in reaching out into the community and really helping that franchise be successful. You know, I mean, we won a Stanley Cup and my women won the national title. So
You have a pretty good track record.
pretty good. Yeah, now we're in a rebuilding process. Whenever you win titles, it's a refresher course again.
As a Philadelphia Eagles fan, I know this entirely too well.
Oh, yeah.
But what I wanted to come back to is a theme that I've noticed in the way that you talk about your business decisions and your personal real estate decisions is you seem unafraid to say, that's not the right value, I want this. Or
Yes.
that can't make money, but this can, and I want that. I will speak for myself. That's something I have trouble doing. I think a lot of women can struggle with being very open about financial decisions and financial moves. And I know you've also been involved through your philanthropy with girls' economic empowerment. So we could probably have a 5-hour conversation about how to empower women economically. But what do you tell to women and girls around the world about better optimizing their own financial power?
First of all, you really have to get out in the world and understand the way the world's working. If you're not worldly in the sense and you're watching other deals going down and what's worked, what's not worked, there's more startup companies even in the tech industry that fail immediately. You need to hone your instincts. And not only that, just don't keep it to yourself, but you bring advisors in. And they will school you, whether it's smart or it's not smart. And sometimes I will do things and I will say, I know this is going to work. And there have been a couple of investments I'm like, I should have done it. Like there's this company, Framebridge, that this woman started. And she asked me to invest in it and people told me not to do it. And I'm really, to this day, I regret it. And I use her all the time. I just think it's one of the most brilliant companies that she's been able to start. You have to really keep your eyes and your ears open. And I'll tell you a story. I was in the owner's box and I hear my partners and they're talking to each other about investments. And there was this one investment that one of the partners wanted to start. And he says, I've gotten X number of thousands of dollars from Michael Jordan, and they're naming these names. And I'm like, well, if they're going to invest in that, why couldn't I? And I said, wait a minute, what are you all talking about? And they said, what are you talking? I said, I'm listening to you, and I want to be in this conversation, and I would like to invest. Well, you know, it may be closing. I said, no, open it back up. I want to invest in it. And to this day, I'm an investor in this company. But you have to have, what is it, the perseverance?
The gumption.
The gumption. You need to get in there and express your feelings.
You need to say, I want to be in this conversation.
And it's the way you communicate that with strength and confidence. And you'll say, I want to really, no, I want to be in there with you.
I hope we hear more women say that. It's hard, though. It's hard when the boys do the boy thing and go off in a group, and we don't have enough women in these spaces.
Yeah, you know, it's really interesting. The students that I put through school, especially through the Kennedy School, when they graduated, I gave them all a set of golf clubs. And they're like, why? I said, because there's more decisions made on the golf course than any other place. And so they've all learning to play golf, and they're going out there to play with their...
It's a good life skill.
Yeah.
And you also own a golf course.
Oh, boy, do I. I'm part of the PGA Tour.
And the only Black woman to be so.
Yeah.
You're breaking barriers left and right.
I think you have to stand for something. You can't be for everyone, but you're going to be the brand for people who really resonate with you. I think going back to what I said, you just really need to be authentic. You have to have a point of view.
Jenny, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm super excited to talk about all you're building with Freja New York. Before we get into all the nitty-gritty, give me a little 30-second rundown of who you are and what you're building today.
Hi, Alex. Thanks so much for having me. My name is Jenny. I was born in China, grew up in the US, went to Cornell for college, and then I graduated without a job twice, not for lack of trying, but for my last interview that I ever did, I couldn't find a bag that made me feel really confident walking in, so obviously didn't get the job, and I started to design Freja instead.
Very cool. What is Freja? Who is your consumer base? For someone who's never heard of you, how would you describe the brand?
Freja, I would describe us as, so we're a New York-based handbag brand for women. We make functional and very thoughtful pieces to support women in their everyday endeavors. So we started with my interpretation of the perfect work bag, and now we have expanded to shoulder bags, travel.
As you were mentioning, we're applying for jobs in a very different industry. You were potentially going to be a consultant. So where does the design inspiration and design background come from?
I don't have a design background. The thing I kept telling myself was, no one was born a designer. Maybe after I give it a couple years, I can be a designer too. And I think that's why we lean so heavily on the functional aspect, because I'm not an aesthetic designer. So I was like, I can make a bag work the way I want it to, and then kind of build design around that.
What were some of those functions that you definitely wanted to make sure that Freja could check off for women in their day-to-day life?
Yeah, I wanted it to be, really lightweight. I wanted the straps to fit over big coats. I know that's like a big thing. Laptops, pockets. I feel like a lot of bags don't really have that many pockets, and now I can't use a different bag. So I'm like, I need my pockets, I need the key leash, and I just want it to feel structured but yet soft for every day.
Yeah, that's super exciting to have this vision that you had in your head and be able to bring it to life. But I'm sure that there were so many steps along the way to ensure that that could happen. So walk me through the early days of Freja when you had this idea, you left that interview and you did not feel confident coming in. Having that vision in your mind, what were the first couple steps that you took to then start actually building a physical product?
Yeah, first step was I need a bag. I actually didn't think that far in advance. I don't really think more than what I need to do next. Yeah. So I was like, okay, I need a bag. How do I do that? I need materials first. And so I did research for materials. So we started there.
Okay.
I wanted to use vegan leather because I'm not personally vegan, but I thought, I don't have this background. I don't know how to source. I don't know how to do anything. Let me find a material that I can feel confident in, knowing exactly what went into it. And it's custom made for us, so I know exactly what goes into it and how it's made. And I feel very comfortable and confident knowing those things.
You mentioned that you're not an aesthetic designer, but obviously the bags are, very cute and very fashion forward. How did you fuse your interest in making it a super functional bag with making it also something that women are excited to wear in their everyday life walking around the streets of New York?
Thank you. Honestly, I'm surprised that I feel really grateful that people also like our designs. I think we always start with functionality, and I'm a very minimal person. I wear the same thing every single day. I have my uniform. So I wanted to kind of add that ethos into our brand as well. So I think everything you'll see, we don't really do seasonal colors. We don't really do anything too funky. It's all pretty minimal and sleek, and I want it to be classic and timeless.
What's your everyday uniform that you're wearing?
Just the easy top. I love trousers and a sling bag and a Freja bag. I think it just looks so chic. And then some earrings and jewelry.
Is there a fashion trend, especially as you're building this company and building this brand in the New York fashion landscape? Is there a fashion trend that you're really leaning into, or are there some trends that you stay away from, or how do you kind of see the constantly evolving trend landscape as you're building the company?
Yeah, I honestly, I don't look at trends because I think they come and go, right? Like everything old is new again. I would rather just make something that people can wear all the time, 24/7, 365 days a year. Because that's what I do. Like I don't really lean into trends, and I'm not on TikTok. I think that helps. So I think, just classic every day. I think as I get older, even more so. Like there was a time where I dabbled in color for a couple of months, but now I'm just like so true to like what feels right to me.
How do you go about keeping your like true to self ethos for a company that you're building? Because obviously, like as a human, like we can, be ourselves in a lot of different ways. But as you're building a brand, like that's for so many different humans then that, you want to connect with it and you want to be able to, like you said, feel confident buying your things and using your things. So how do you kind of combine your true to self and the center of yourself with this company that you want to be able to kind of be that for other women as well?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. Like for starters, I started Freja for me. I didn't start it to become like a really big brand. I was like, there's a product that I think needs to exist in the world and I'm going to make it. And if there are other women who believe the same thing, I'll resonate with them and they're going to be our community and I'm going to talk to them in a way that feels really authentic to me. And that's what attracted them in the first place. And then also, I think I've built the brand in a very transparent way.
Yeah.
Like, Freja actually started as a blog before we had a single bag. So I had a year when I didn't have any product. So I just started documenting everything I would do. Like, oh, this is how much our first sample cost. This is what it looked like. This is what we're working on now. And then that kind of turned into our about page. So I think transparency and authenticity has always been a part of the brand DNA. And even until today, like I share how much your bags cost to make. And then people love that.
Yeah. In terms of building that community, I feel like community involvement and community engagement is such a core like importance to so many startups today and so many brands that want to break through the noise, and especially saturated industries like fashion. How do you go about building that community now? Who really are they and how are you attempting to connect with them on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, I think going back to what I said, you just really need to be authentic. You have to have a point of view. I think you have to stand for something. You can't be for everyone, but you're going to be the brand for people who really resonate with you. And for Freja, what that looks like, I want to do a lot more community events. We just threw our first open to the public event, I think 2 weeks ago, and it was so amazing. Like seeing everyone walk in the door, everyone was wearing their Freja bags. I got to talk to everyone. And we recently launched a Freja Fund as well, which is an 8-week boot camp for women who want to start their own businesses. So I think Freja, like, I love bags, but what I love more is like using Freja as a jumping off point, as a vehicle to do other things. Like eventually I think Freja, I want it to stand for like empowerment. Like, hey, if I could do something, if I could follow a dream, so can you.
Yeah, definitely. Can you tell me a little bit more about that Freja Fund? I'd love to know who you're kind of targeting with that and what the obviously mission behind it is, but also like how you're bringing those things to life. What are the activations and those sorts of things? Yeah,
so this one, it's been on my mind for a while. It's always been something I wanted to do because I think, my life has changed beyond since starting Freja in like the best way possible. And I think there's so many women out there who have their own ideas. And, they might just lack a little bit of funding or a little bit of experience, or honestly, just I think what I needed at the time was like someone to tell me you're not crazy. And if an idea feels meaningful to you, you should go for it. So I think that's kind of the angle that we are aiming for. Like I'm not an expert in anything. I'm not gonna give advice, but I think like just to be a source for women to lean on. So we officially launched the program in August, so we made it live, and we actually just finalized our candidates yesterday. So we'll be reaching out to everyone, and then we're going to curate a 8-week boot camp based on like what they need, and it's going to be like one-on-one sessions with me, with the amazing women in my network, with my team, and with each other.
Throughout your journey, is there like a lesson that you hope to bring into these meetings that you're having with these up and coming female founders or just women interested in business? Like, is there something that you feel like a lot of them will really resonate with that you wish you had known before starting?
I think something, at least in the beginning, I think something you really, really need to hear a lot is don't overthink it. I think a lot of women, they're thinking so many steps ahead when they don't have a product. I'm like, it's okay. Like, don't worry about that now. Have the product first. Right. And then because future you is going to know what to do. Like you today is not going to see past like, step 2, but you don't need to do that. So I think just taking the pressure off and just doing it one step at a time.
And just like you want to be kind of a resource for, others kind of in your shoes that you were a couple of years ago, is there someone in your life that you feel like without them you would not be where you are today?
Yeah, I have a mentor figure. I met him, I actually interviewed with a job.
Okay.
Interviewed with him for a job. He didn't give me the job, but he was like, what ideas do you have? And I told him my idea about Freja, and he's like, you should do it. And I don't know, I think I would have done Freja. I don't know when I would have, but he really pushed me to start. So I started halfway through grad school, and I just went full time with that after.
And knowing that your potential career path was going to be something along the consulting route, jumping into the entrepreneurship space can feel so much less certain, and just like there's so much more up in the air for, the day-to-day, but also like what 5 years down the road can look like. What was your mindset when you decided to kind of make that pivot and go the non-traditional or just like uncertain route?
Yeah, a couple things. Well, I thought I was supposed to be a consultant or finance, because that's just like what everyone did. It never felt really true to me. Like I was prepping for these interviews, like when you're kind of just rehearsing and you're just, I don't know, it just doesn't feel true. I heard a quote somewhere and it's really stuck with me. He said, if I went down the consulting path or the path that I was supposed to go down, the chance of me achieving what I want in life is 0. But if I did my own thing, the chance of that is not 0. So it's actually less risky to do your own thing. And that really, really stuck with me. And that's like something I go back to and think about a lot.
I love that. What is it that you want to achieve? Like, what was that kind of beacon that you were going after?
I think I've always wanted to start my own business. Like I've dabbled since I was in high school. I started making money online in high school, all throughout college as well, which is also why I wasn't like in a rush to get a job. But yeah, I really value like being creative, having freedom. And then I think business is a way for you to see like what you want to see in the world. And I want to build Freja as a business that I would want to see and support.
What were some of those ventures that you were embarking in high school and college that was earning you some money?
Oh, this is fun. So in high school, I got really into cooking, and I was vegan for a couple years, so I started cooking recipes, and I would share them on Instagram, and I would repost others, and I would share all their recipes too. I grew that to 800,000 followers.
Okay.
Started writing ebooks, so I wrote like recipe ebooks, and I sold those, so that was my high school. So that carried me through college a little bit. Graduated undergrad, didn't find a job. Started drop shipping, made a lot of money doing that, and then that is how I got the seed money for Freja. So it's kind of like one step after the other.
Yeah.
And then neither of those panned out. So especially for Freja, I was like, hey, I wouldn't say businesses, I've made money in the past, but neither was sustainable. If I'm gonna do it again, if I'm gonna invest all this time and effort into it, I want it to be for the long term. So I've always looked at Freja very long term. Like nothing happened for the first 2 years, but then I think like the last year and a half, things started getting fun.
Yeah,
but
so
it just takes time.
Yeah, you've had multiple lives as a founder or a business person then. From those earlier lives, what are some like tips or tricks or things that you want to maybe avoid that you're now taking into building this company the third time around? Yeah,
number one is your customer. Your customer is number one. Like they are your everything. You treat them with, they're smart. Like your customers are smart. Give them all the information and then they can make an informed decision, but like treat them with so much respect because they are your everything. I think with like, I was so young, right? With Instagram, I was like, oh, let me just sell some ebooks. And I would post ads all the time. And like that really ruined the connection with the community. So I think that's why I prioritize community so much now because they're everything. You mentioned earlier that you just had your first like in-person event for community building. You're also on social media, even though you personally are not on TikTok. The brand itself is on Instagram, it's on TikTok. How are you going about kind of walking the line of the digital world, but also the like in-person world when it comes to promoting the company and finding new experiences to connect with your customers? Yeah, I think our digital strategy, because most people will find us through Instagram or through friends or an influencer. I think that strategy is a bit different from the in-person. So digital, I want to be like, I don't know, like an inspirational, like cool design, sleek. I think that's how people find us. And then once they're in, they get my newsletters every week. They're kind of like buying into the Freja brand. They get invited to these events. They can meet me. Like I have my email on the website. Like anyone can reach me. I'll reply. So I think you're drawn in social media, and then we can translate that into something deeper offline.
Do you have a social media strategy that you feel like has really worked in terms of whether that's like getting influencers to come on board or just customers to find you online?
Social media, we do a lot of UGC, so we repost a lot of our customers. We have like a Friday favorites where we just post all of our customers. We should reshare everything. I think for me, like I don't want our social media to be super polished.
Yeah.
I don't want to be like everyone else. Also, it's hard to do like polished content all the time. I just want to share. I want to like be in my kitchen and film a video and then post it. And that's kind of what we do. And I think it resonates with people. Like we share a lot of behind the scenes. Like I'll be sharing behind the scenes of this experience. I think that's our not strategy.
Yeah. Has there been a moment throughout this journey that you feel like you have like your I made it moment? I know that some celebrities have been seen wearing Freja. You know, you've kind of grown in that space, but has there been one moment that you're like, I really have come so far. I'm really doing this on my own?
Every time I see someone wearing a Freja bag on the street in New York, I used to run up to them.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't do that as much now, but I'll like snap a picture of you from behind or like sneakily. I have a folder called Freja Sightings on my phone.
It. How many have you seen?
I think like over 100 at this point. Yeah.
And does it mean more to you to see like random people on the street, to see these celebrities wearing it?
Random people.
Okay.
No, not random people, just like women that, you know, we didn't gift or, you know, that because they bought into the story. Like something about Freja resonated with them. They chose to spend their money on us. Like there's so many bag brands, but somehow like they were like, I want to support you. So like that means everything to me.
What do you think is the future of the fashion and art and style space in general? Like I said at the beginning, and kind of like you mentioned there are so many brands out there. How do you see the future shaping up? What are you kind of preparing for as you hopefully make your way into that future?
I think having a really, really unique brand and point of view, like I don't think brands need to get really big. Like my goal is not to be really big. And I think like in the past it would be like mega brands, right? The Abercrombies and the Hollisters, and everyone knew them. But I think you don't need to grow to be that big to be successful. Like I measure success in, hey, we have a community that really, really, really loves our products, and that's fine. We can just keep serving them. And I feel like I just want everything to be very, very organic. It's never like a salesy, pushy tactic. It's always like let's pull you in, let's draw you in based on what we're doing, and we'll just find the people that are meant to be. And I just want it to be very organic.
Yeah. And if it's not to be the next Abercrombie, what are some goals that you have with Freja?
With Freja, I really want to do more philanthropy, like with the Freja Fund. I want to partner with colleges, and I want to partner with nonprofits. You know, there's nonprofits that donate clothing to women for interviews, or like just, you know, more professional clothing to give them a leg up or some confidence. And I feel like that really calls to me, and I feel like that's something we could do. And it feels really full circle because like Freja, we make bags to support women, and then by supporting us, we're funneling that into supporting other women's dreams. So I feel like that just feels very, very good to me.
Yeah. It seems like a lot of what you're doing is very like impact driven. I mean, even from the core of the company, just being like, we need something that we can wear to work or to an interview, all the way to the Freja Fund and supporting others along the way. What do you want your impact to be, or what do you want your legacy to be with this brand?
I want Freja to represent opportunity. I want it to be like, hey, you can do whatever you want. I did it, and so can you.
Yeah.
I think that's the message.
That's super special. And I think that so many women, female founders or women in general, are always looking for a message like that.
And it like doesn't have to be a big idea. Like I just do bags. It doesn't have to be big or small. I feel like as long as it feels meaningful to you, like that's what matters.
Yeah. Being under 30 years old, being a founder, the young founder space is really difficult. You know, so many people have so much more experience than maybe those our age, but we come at it with such a unique vision and your, you know, experience and something that you really wanted to bring to the world. And I'm sure that there are many benefits to being under 30 years old as well. So what does that youth and that, you know, under 30 kind of category mean to you?
I think it allows me to connect with, you know, our customer. Our customer is me. Honestly, like I wrote a customer persona. I sent it to all my friends. They're like, Jenny, this is just you.
Yeah.
So like being under 30 and connecting with the under 30 community, like it's a lot easier because I know how to speak to them. I know how to reach them. And I know how they want to be sold to. They don't want to be sold to.
Do you have any predictions of what the fashion and the art and style industry is going to look like within the next couple of months or years?
Okay, not art and style or fashion, but like I can talk about bags.
Yes,
That's my
of
realm.
course.
I think bigger bags are in, like micro bags we're done with those. So bigger bags, and then also suede is coming back in a really big way. And I think like burgundies, like deep reds, and we might be doing some of that soon. So
Very cool. How much do you take like those projections that you have or predictions of the future when you're deciding like what to build? How far out do you look? How far in advance are you kind of like thinking about those things?
Very loosely.
Okay.
And we're always behind.
Okay.
Yep.
How, are you attempting to stay ahead of the curve, or do you follow, what your customers are asking you for? How do you kind of find that fine line there?
Yeah, it's a lot of it is like we don't do many trends, but if there's a trend that I'm like, okay, I think this could be a classic, I would follow that. And we take into account all of our customer requests. Like we have a spreadsheet that documents like how many times everything has been requested, and then like I'll always refer it back to that when designing.
Well, that's super exciting. I cannot wait to see what you do. Thanks so much for sitting down with me
Thank
today.
you, Alex.
Mara, so great to be here with you today.
Awesome. It's great to be here.
So the crypto world is very confusing for a lot of people. So I want you to break it down for me in the simplest of terms. What does your company do?
So maybe let's start from the beginning to help break down the concepts. So public blockchains are really public goods that anyone can participate in and contribute to. They're open source technologies. Our company is really focused on enabling people in contributing and participating in networks. And one of the most important things when you think about what a blockchain really does, which is store and distribute data that is, cohesive and, it preserves integrity across different participants in a network. The most important thing is to make sure it's secure so that it cannot be corrupted, it cannot be hacked. There's two types of ways in which blockchains maintain security. It's either through contribution of computing power. It's called proof of work. Really popular blockchains like Bitcoin use that system to preserve security. And anyone can really, spin up a miner or contribute their computing power to support the network, and in return, earn rewards for doing so. Okay. In more modern blockchains like Ethereum, which is actually the second largest blockchain that exists today, you have a mechanism that is called staking. It's a mechanism by which a user can lock up their Ethereum or their cryptocurrency, and in return, they receive rewards for securing the network. Our technology enables a very broad set of participants to very safely and accessibly access and contribute to the technologies.
When you say like locking it, is it kind of like putting, money into a bank or a savings account like that?
It's very similar. You can think of it as analogous to, having your dollars in a bank account and receiving interest for holding it there, because your bank actually does things with that dollar. It puts it to use. When you hold Ethereum or you hold a cryptocurrency and you want to contribute to security, locking it up in the network has the same effect. You provide security, and in return, you get rewards. So prominent blockchains like Ethereum, for example, today issue rewards at a rate of 3.5 or so %. And so it's a really exciting way for people to start becoming part of a network, to contribute to it, and that's quite exciting. So that's really the focus that we've taken.
So take me back to the beginning. What was your founding story?
I think way beginning, probably just for a little bit of context on myself, I grew up super internationally, moved around a lot as a kid, lived in different countries. I guess got very used to starting things over and, being adaptive. And I think that in many ways, sort of contributed to me getting excited and also feeling comfortable starting projects and also businesses today. I ended up getting very interested in Web3 or in crypto. I want to say just shortly after coming out of college. I'd studied economics. I was really interested in the concept of value distribution and value creation and how different systems can impact how value is created and how it's effectively distributed. And as someone who's grown up with the internet, I, was effectively part of a generation that is very used to, using computers and using the internet and also seeing its impact on the world. I think my mom always jokes there's like a photo of me wearing Pampers, turning on an old Macintosh. And so I got very used to that. And I think one of the things that really drew me to this space
is that inherently the promise of having this global computer that allows users, contributors, and the network itself to distribute value in a meaningful way was really interesting for me, coming out of a generation that has been so used to using the internet on a daily basis. And so, in many ways, Web3 is really there to revolutionize and reduce the cost and the distribution of value on the internet. And that's a quite interesting promise.
So you've had quite a history in the crypto world. Can you walk me through your background before founding this company?
Absolutely. I've worked full-time in this space about 7 years now, which is many years in crypto. I actually had, as I mentioned, gotten, into crypto in college. I was at the time reading, white papers about, protocols that were coming out, and I was really curious about learning more. And at the time, I met one of the co-founders of Ethereum, Joe Lubin, who had actually started a venture production studio out of Bushwick in New York. Because the technology was so new when the company was started, which was about 2015, 2016, the model was really try to build things and see what sticks. See what developer tooling is needed in order for people to actually start building on top of this new technology. And I found the company really interesting because it allowed a lot of people with very different backgrounds to come together and contribute to the technology. I stayed with the business for about 3 years at the time, did a ton of research. I was involved in leading strategic partnerships and also ventures within the company. And for me, my focus was really figuring out what the next big thing was going to be that would help the technology continue to evolve. At the time, Ethereum was going through a major upgrade. And as I mentioned before, there's these two security systems, proof of work and proof of stake. And Ethereum was going through that transition exactly at that time. And as you can think, a live network that needs an upgrade across thousands of different computers at the same time is really a difficult thing to coordinate. And so yes, was at the time already starting to build different ideas of things that I thought would be very important for the industry as this migration was happening, as it would open up a lot of new product opportunities. At the time, I'd started research on a venture that my partner actually ended up turning into a business that I still sit on the board of today. But also got really excited about staking as one of the mechanisms that really cements the security model of blockchains and what lives underneath them. At the time, I was really keen to learn from some amazing founders, and I met Joe and Eren, who had started a company called Bison Trails. At the time, they were becoming the leading blockchain infrastructure provider in the space, and I ended up leading our business team and helping our growth. And fast enough, we got acquired by Coinbase, which is a fairly large company in this space. And as part of that acquisition, we ended up building a very AWS-style model inside of the company, where we realized that there was a ton of value in empowering other businesses and other companies and institutions to offer crypto services to their users. And so infrastructure services, payment services, data services became part of that product suite that became known as Coinbase Cloud.
Very cool. Now, what made you think, this is it, I'm going to take the dive into entrepreneurship myself and then go out and start a totally new company?
I think in hindsight, it felt very intuitive. I had started writing about what our company today ultimately does around 2020. At the time, the promise of being able to build B2B SaaS in the blockchain infrastructure market was emerging. And so there was an opportunity that was ripe to be developed and worked on. One of the things within Coinbase, our origin story being a quite unique one, because we spun out of different businesses to form our company, and that's a quite atypical way to start a business that is early stage. One of the things that we realized when thinking about how do we create the most value in this open network by providing these services, and the answer for us was very simple. It has to be interoperable. And for it to be interoperable, you need loads of different market participants and players to build and to buy into a model that is inherently collaborative. There are a few examples of businesses that were built that way, and Visa is probably one of the most prominent and successful examples. And a lot of people actually don't know the story of Visa, but Visa was a company that was actually built in collaboration with different merchant banks, competing companies that were brought together by a man called D-Hawk, who wrote incredible books about the process of getting all of these competing companies to sit around the same table. And it's a quite challenging thing to do. We think in many ways is the thing that creates a collaborative advantage for us. And at the same time, it's something extremely difficult to do from within any given company. You want to build that foundation that is neutral, that is collective, where incentives are aligned for different participants to contribute to that business. And so our founding story is actually my co-founder, Matt, coming from a competing company, myself, and from Coinbase with a lot of team members that I'd worked with before, and then another company called Kraken, which is one of the biggest exchanges in the space. We all came together to effectively fund and start that business, and that was really exciting.
Interesting. Now, I want to know exactly, I know you said it's a B2B company, who are your users, who are your customers, and how many do you have?
Yeah, so as a B2B business, we effectively have built a product that is enterprise grade. We focus heavily on security, and so the companies that we sell to today are mostly, crypto native businesses, large exchanges, custodians, and fintechs that are looking into the space. Today we have platform integrations with over 9 different platforms, including market leaders like Coinbase, BitGo, Anchorage, Fireblocks, Copper, and others, which we're really excited about because those businesses effectively have integrated our product into the back-end services of their product suites and can offer that to their customer bases, which in some cases are institutional clients and in other cases are retail customers.
So how do you get, Coinbase and all these competing marketplaces to buy into, collaboratively come together and support your product?
It's one of the really interesting challenges, but also in some ways, I think, a moat for us because it's a hard thing to do. When we think about what the value proposition is of our product, it's to ensure that different market participants and different users can access this technology and really participate inside of blockchains in a really easy and secure manner. For us, it was very clear that in order to accomplish that, building with network effects, making sure that there's accessibility across a very broad range of solutions is very important. Because of our origin story, we were very fortunate to have found early partners. I mean, at the time, I was actually still working at Coinbase when we, conceptualized this and pitched it to the executive team. But I think it resonated with participants that were trying to fix a problem that they had seen for their customers and an opportunity space that was really compelling. And one of the good things when you think about these collaborative models is once you have the first 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 partners around the table, it becomes incrementally easier to build that buy-in, to build that collective, cohesive positioning in the market. And one of the things that we found very effective, and also why we decided to build on this model, is that a lot of the work that has to be done in crypto today is also being progressive and being upfront about advocacy on the policy side. And so there's a shared incentive for different market leaders to come together and say, hey, this technology is really important. This particular feature is really important to support networks more holistically. Why don't we work on this together and really drive forward the policy discourse in different jurisdictions?
Interesting. So how are you different than all the rest of the other staking providers that are out there today? What sets you apart?
I would say our collaborative advantage. We've been built and integrated as a B2B business with different platforms. Our focus has been really on security, enterprise grade diversification, and a compliance-focused design. And I think that's probably one of the most important distinguishers of how we look at the market. It's hard to build for a market segment that is still emerging because it requires you to take an inherently long-term view on the market, especially when you think about the types of market players that we anticipate to start really actively participating, like traditional banks, right? That might still be a couple of years out on the adoption curve.
Interesting. Now, quickly tell me about your fundraising journey. How much have you raised and what has that afforded you and your company?
For sure. So we raised our first seed round in August of 2022. We raised capital from our early partners, so we didn't take any VC funding at that early point in time. We raised $6.2 million then with collaboration and participation from Coinbase, Kraken, and Figment. We later raised a Series A in June of last year. That was a $12 million round that allowed us to really focus on our growth and expanding some of our strategic footprint with partners in major geographies. Our investors in the round included Ethereal and Variant, who led the round, but we also brought in strategic institutional capital from Brevin Howard and Avon Ventures, a subsidiary of Fidelity. And so that was really important for us in order to continue expanding our footprint in the market, to house strategic partners in different jurisdictions, but also to, to have the capital to continue building and innovating on top of the product that we had launched in the market.
Very cool. And now, does the volatile nature of, crypto and Ethereum ever worry you, or how are you looking at the market?
Having worked in the space for a couple of years now, I think you get used to it. Market cycles being quite short and close together in crypto can be really distracting for builders and for companies, and I've seen more often than not that these cycles can be, quite challenging for businesses to navigate. I think one of the consequences of working in the space like this is that you become inherently quite resilient and also naturally gravitate towards a long-term focus that ensures that when all the noise around you continues to happen, you can really, center yourself around the mission and the vision that you have for your business.
Excellent. And final question for you, what would you like your legacy to be?
I think I would love to bring more founders into the space. I found that one of the things that has been incredibly rewarding in this journey is actually supporting and investing in other founders, especially those that are really early stage, and trying to navigate the space. I would love to see more women in the space. One of the things that really, is part of my journey when I was about 24, I think was the first time I found something I was really excited about. And I said, you know what, someone should really build this, but who's gonna give me any money, right? Truthfully. Yeah. And I would love to be able to build confidence in this generation, but also generations that come after, that it's absolutely something that you can do and you should have the confidence and ability to go after it.
That is a great goal, especially in a space where there's so few women. So that is excellent. Well, thank you so much for sitting with me.
Awesome. It was great. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Maggie McGrath, Senior Editor at Forbes. The 10th annual Forbes list of the next billion-dollar startups is out now. And on the list is a company called Promise. It is a $520 million powerhouse that is helping people who are delinquent on their utility bills pay their municipalities. I am here with the founder and CEO of Promise, Phaedra Ellis-Lampkins. Phaedra, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I just gave a brief overview of what Promise is, but I'd love to hear it in your own words. What is Promise and what does it do?
Yeah, first, thank you so much again for having me. Promise is a company that works with governments and highly regulated utilities. And what we do is we help bring money into the government through interest-free payment plans, and we help money go out to people who need resources and run aid programs like emergency water assistance or climate credits right now in the state of Washington. So anywhere the flow of money goes in and out of government is where we are.
What gave you the idea for this company?
Yeah, I think I had more of a feeling. I had a pretty diverse professional background, and I was struck with the idea that most of the technology that was being built by people who wanted technology to work for the things they cared about. Guys who wanted a taxi when they got out of a club, people who needed parking or dog walking or a dry cleaning. And it struck me that some of the world's biggest problems, or the problems the people that I grew up with, were not being addressed by technology. So originally what we wanted to do is to build a company that was focused on people who were most in need of technology and would build technology that helped people. And so it was more about kind of what was the economic model? How do you make money? How do you use capitalism? How do you use technology in a way that is not predatory, but that grows, right? We didn't want to build a social service agency. We wanted to build a beautifully working well technology company that was fundamentally dominating the market.
Now this, I do want to underscore what you just said here. It is a for-profit company. It has a social mission to help people and to help governments. But at the end of the day, Promise is a for-profit company, correct?
Yeah, and we're like, the thing I want to do is I want to beat people on margins. I want to beat people on revenue, because I think people see it as a social mission because we're serving poor people, right? But if I was staying a company as like, we're going to provide services for the richest among us, people would be like, totally makes sense, But I think when you serve people who are poor in a way that isn't predatory, it becomes a social mission. But that's what I want to do. It's like, I want to be clear that we should build companies that at the core of their mission is winning for their customers, which in our case is government and poor people.
Let's go through a typical use case, if you will. So my colleague, Amy Feldman, the editor of the Next Billion Dollar Startup List, has a great profile, and you should go on Forbes.com to read all about Promise in detail. But for folks watching this video, let's say I'm a consumer in Pennsylvania. I have fallen behind on my utility payments. The municipality, my local government, is coming after me for those payments. Where does Promise enter that equation?
Yeah, it's a great question. So in the use case of, we basically have two products. Payment plans are one of our products. And in payment plans, we find you. And so we get an bill. Think about it as we get a file of all the people who are behind. We reach out to you by text and we say, hey, we see you're behind. Are you interested in getting an interest-free payment plan? And people can sign up. Think of it as a subscription payment plan. And they can pay through any method, and there's flexibility. And so we find you, you would sign up in app. Sometimes people find out about us through call center agents, or you might call and say, I'm behind, or you get a call and someone's referred to us. But most people sign up through a text message they receive saying you're behind.
Interest-free sounds almost too good to be true. We're in this era of buy now, pay later and high interest rates. So if I get a text message saying interest-free, I'm a journalist, I'm inherently skeptical, but I think given the economic environment we're in, I would wonder, is this for real? So I guess what I'm asking is, how do you do that? And how do you as a for-profit company then make money if consumers are engaging with you on an interest-free basis?
Yeah, it's a great question. So maybe I'll answer it with the economics and then the reason why those economics work. And so the economics are, for example, one of the cities profiled in the article that Amy wrote is the city of Richmond, Virginia. That's our client. They sign people up on payment plans all the time. And before we got there, they had less than a 15% success rate. And so if you think about the fact that they're trying to collect money themselves, that they're spending the same amount of energy and time that, in fact, they probably someone called to set it up. They probably had to apply to be able to put on a payment plan. So one thing that they have to do is they have to have the infrastructure to offer a payment plan. The second thing is most people fail. And then they end up at collections where they either sell the debt, and in this is different than Richmond, but in most cities, they sell the debt. So you end up with a debt collector, you might get 20 cents on the dollar. You shut the person off. So in the utilities case, you have to have staffing to shut someone off. You sell the debt for less than it's worth. And people are unsuccessful, and you cannot plan for the finances of the utility. And so in that case, the debt that was behind was 13% of their overall revenue. So it's a pretty significant economic hit. We come in and we say, we're going to sign people up for a payment plan. We have a really good sense for predictability of how many people we will get into a payment plan. And we see anywhere between an 85 to a 95% repayment rate. So you go to someone and say, you are not getting any money back right now. You're having to shut people off. You're staffing this yourself. We're going to come in and you no longer have to staff it. We're going to increase your repayment rate to 85%. In the case of Richmond, Virginia, it's 93%. And so it makes sense for the utility in that case to be able to make the investment of paying us, because they lose the operational cost and they keep a continuous source of income and they never have to shut off. And so that's how it works. So the jurisdiction pays us because our principle is, and we got offered a contract as an example in a state who we love and have a relationship with around property taxes. And they said, we want you to perk on property taxes. State law requires we charge interest. And we just said, we cannot charge interest and will not. So you have to figure out a way to not charge interest because we're just not going to do it.
It's so interesting, but when you apply the term government tech to your space, I think some investors' eyes can glaze over. It's not the sexiest space. What was the reaction when you took Promise to Silicon Valley, to the venture capital world, to seek funding? Because you do have $51 million in funding, so you've been successful in finding investors. But what was that process like?
Yeah, I mean, I think... So we've been lucky that we haven't really touched our last raise because we're profitable as a company. And so we raised in 21. And so we've been good financial stewards of the company, which I think matters. But when we were initially raising, I think a couple of things happened. One, I'd run revenue at a company that I'm now on the board of. So I think people had a good sense like, oh, you get how to make money. And I think our investors, some had experience with government, but most did not. And I think they believed that we understood the market, that we knew how to make money, and that the market is pretty significant. If you look at government spending around these issues, it's much larger than the private sector in many cases. And I think large companies sell to those markets, right? You can't imagine a Microsoft without selling to the government. But it's a new thing, I think, for investors. But I think you're going to make money. You understand what the total addressable market is. You know how to sell, and we were able to sell pretty quickly, which I think gave people a sense of confidence. But and we were purposeful about the investors we took. We wanted investors who deeply understood how to scale and grow, and also knew how to run operations well.
You talk about growing pretty quickly. I think Amy had a line in there about how you didn't have a sales department. It's inbound interest. So is word of mouth just spreading faster than you can get the word out yourself?
It's so embarrassing. Our sales team is growing. We just hired 2 new people. It's been 2 of us. And I think that I wanted to make sure the product was really strong. So I think when you have a strong product, it does sell itself. And I think one of the clients we introduced, Amy, who did the Forbes piece, wrote like a 3-page list of why promise worked. And I was like, she should be our person, our marketing spend, because she was like, promise made, promise kept. Here's the economics. Here's why it makes sense. And so I think building credibility worked for us, building a product that worked well, and not focusing on selling, but really focusing on delivering was the right way for us to do it.
You said embarrassing, but it just sounds like you were dealing with a lean operation and you wanted proof of concept before building out a sales department and really going whole hog.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, I think our investors are very interesting, because for a long time they're like, spend more. And then I think the last downturn of the economy, people were like, oh, that was so smart. That was like brilliant, because I was like, that was brilliant, because I think there was a time in venture where people were just like growth, spend. I just don't think that's sustainable. I think I'm not a young founder. I understand how important these things are to people that we serve. And, a lot of times if we send a text that sends the wrong message, that your water's going to get shut off, that you're not going to get aid, or you're going to get aid and you really don't, the consequences of our work are really significant. So I wanted to make sure we could really deliver. And I just thought putting our head up and hiring a big team was not the right decision for us. And it ended up working out for us. But for a while, I had a lot of pressure to spend more. And so I love this moment, this like the company's got to work moment. It's a moment that we were built for in many ways.
It's so interesting because in Forbes Women and at Forbes in general, we talk about how female founders and female founders of color are often more capital efficient than their white male counterparts. And what you have just described seems like an example in action of that capital efficiency and how that can pay off later on, even when you're getting pressure to spend.
Especially, I think, because we could raise. I think what I was lucky about, I think, as a female founder and a founder of color, is that which very few Black women have this experience, that I could raise capital, right? Like if we wanted to raise right now, we could raise a very high valuation, we could raise a lot of capital. But it is unusual, I think, that we were just like, I don't want to dilute the company. I want people who work here to become independently wealthy. And I want our product to be amazing. And so if I spend my time fundraising, if I'm thinking about returns in a different way, like, am I in the articles? Am I doing this? Instead of saying like, does our product deliver? Do the economics of the company make sense? Like, we don't do business if the margins don't make sense. And I think that's the right thing for us. But yeah, I definitely think you're right that I see it among female founders. I also think I see it among people who have life experience in different ways, because it's like, at some point it is not sustainable to not make money. And the growth required for that thesis to work is so high. Like, it makes sense if you're Amazon, but it doesn't make sense for startups with 50 people to have fancy offices. Like, I always know, we have a joke internally, when someone's going to fail when you walk in and it's a startup and they have an office that's been designed by someone. And you're just like, oh, that was not the right decision. That was not the right decision.
You mentioned a different background. Phaedra, can you talk a little bit about your own personal background and how that has fueled both the idea for the company and the way you are growing it?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up with, in some ways, really lucky, which is my mom was not wealthy. My family was not wealthy, but I was lucky that I was smart. So I was in a lot of programs where I got to see the way that people who had a lot of resources lived. And there's some negative consequences because then you realize I'm not one of those people and I get treated really differently. But it also gave me a strong sense of justice, a strong sense of what I wanted for my own life and what I wanted for other people. Because one of the most clarifying moments for me is in my life was going from free lunch to reduced lunch, which is you just paid 40 cents instead of having it free. And the lack of dignity we give kids. And so like when I was getting lunch, the people who had free lunch, they would call it out and you would stand in the free lunch line. So because you needed a different system, so they had to check you off instead of taking money. And I just like felt embarrassed. I was the only one in my classes ever that was on free lunch. And it gave me a sense of shame. And I just think we are better than that as a country. And we should use technology to make it so that kids don't feel shame because they're in poverty. And so that's what drives me is like, how do I build the government that I think kids deserve?
How do I build the government that kids deserve? Continuing along that line, you did not start your career in fintech. You worked in labor organizing. Can you talk about the jobs that you had before Promise? Because they're all very, very interesting.
Sure. Yeah, I have a very weird career. And I started in the labor movement, working for unions, and really focused on organizing because I thought the most important thing you could do is build economic power for people, that you can increase wages and give people independence to be able to make the best decisions for themselves. And so I spent a lot of time in the labor movement. I ended up running a labor federation and thinking about, how do you create policy? I then went. I was fascinated with the idea that there was a lot of false choices in the labor movement, and one of those false choices was jobs versus the environment. And it struck me that always jobs like paving or anything else would be like, we need those, right? Because they're good jobs. But it was always like poor communities that ended up with the consequences of that, whether waste incinerators or roads or anything else. And so I wanted to understand how could we build an environmental agenda that worked for working people and that was not kind of like fancy people. Like it felt like it was like, all the fancy people who didn't realize they needed jobs. Like you still need to go to work. And so I went to work at an organization called Green for All. I ran that organization. And then I ended up weirdly working with the musician Prince and working with him. And it was really interesting because I saw a common thing happening, which is technology was not good in any of those places. In the labor movement, it changed the way people worked. So it devalued physical work. In the environment, the consequences of it were pretty significant, from the physical components to the way we thought about growth. And then in music, it was devaluing content. So you had musicians of color, musicians who were all of a sudden the things they did were valued less than they were before. And so I wanted to understand, how could you have a vision for technology that helped people, that was good for people? And so I went to a company called Honor, which was focused on home healthcare and using technology to build home healthcare. Was there. I went there to run operations. I ended up running revenue, everything that wasn't engineering. And then I learned a lot. It was like the best school. It was the best school to learn, and especially running revenue, because you just learn about the choices. And then left. I joined the board of that company and started Promise.
And then the idea before Promise was actually grounded in bail reform. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. What I was struck by is that like 2/3 of the people who are incarcerated in county jails are there because they can't afford to get out. So ideally, you think bail is a way to keep people like who people think are potentially a risk to society incarcerated. But most people who are actually incarcerated are not people because of high risk situations. They're just there because they're poor. And so I wanted to understand how technology could help. And I had a personal thing, which is someone I cared about, had to make a choice because they had child support and DUI payments, and they couldn't do both. So then there was a warrant out for their arrest. And they misread the court date, so they'd gone and it looked, and I could see it looked like a 4 and it was a 9, or I don't remember. No, it must have been. They thought it was a 9 and it looked like a 4, and they didn't know how to deal with it. And I was lucky that my co-founder is a criminal defense lawyer, and so we were like, "This is horrible." I was like, "This is horrible. Can you believe this?" And she was like, "Yeah, it happens all the time." And so we dealt with it and helped him. But I just realized that like there's just practical cases of people who are good humans who have these kind of false choices. Do I pay this? Do I make sure I do child support? And I wanted to build something that gave people the ability to not think of incarceration. You should keep working. There should be an incentive for you to keep working. And being incarcerated for someone who has a full-time job, who is a full-time dad, who wants to be a good parent, like, we should want that to work for people. And that seemed to me what technology should be good at.
And then ultimately, there was a line in Amy's story where you were building that product and you saw the way that it could be used for opposite intents, and you got the advice to pivot. How hard was that pivot moment for you?
I mean, it was really scary because I was in a meeting and I was just like sitting there and just was like, oh, and it wasn't that they would use the technology for bad. It was that the efficiency would ultimately be harmful, because even if you do something good, if you build for a system that's fundamentally not working well for people, then you realize you've made a system more efficient, right, at the essence of the institution. And so I had to call investors, and I was scared because I think at that point we'd raised maybe $7 million. Very few Black females had been able to raise that kind of capital. And I was worried, like, does it make me look insane that I'm like, oh, I don't want to do this business because I think it's a bad business. It doesn't feel good. And we have clients. And so I was very personally cognizant of the idea, like, that I was carrying other people with me, and that I didn't want to let people down, and also the people that believed in us, like the people who trusted us as customers. And so we made the pivot. I was very lucky, and I think this is why investors matter. I did not have one investor who was not supportive and just said, like, one of them, Bill, said to me, go in the forest, find yourself. And I just think most women and people of color don't get that. We're just like, go find yourself, you'll figure it out. And but without fail, that is what our investors said.
That is such interesting advice. And now with Promise, I just want to go back to those repayment rates, because it's pretty astounding changes that you're seeing in some of these municipalities. Something like 13% repayment or 30% repayment going up to 85, 95. What happens to the 5% who, even with no interest, are not able to pay their bills?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what the institution is that we're working with, right? In some places, let's say you're a water or electric utility, your power or water gets shut off. So, which is pretty severe in this time, in, with heat and, water. Like, it's the basics. Like, all of the things we work on are the basics. And so those are the consequences. So we don't obviously shut some off. We send them back and we say they haven't been able to fulfill their payment plan with us. But if you don't pay it, there's pretty severe consequences on everything we do.
And how would you characterize Promise's growth? I mean, we talked a little bit earlier about how word of mouth is spreading, and you're choosing now to build out the sales team. But what's your projection for the next year or two in terms of revenue growth and markets that you're in?
Yeah, I mean, this year we're in the tens of millions, and next year we'll be over 100. And part of that is because our largest revenue actually doesn't come from payment plans. Our largest revenue comes from running aid programs for government, for states, and there we're getting money out. So what we do is we use machine learning, and we say for states, and I'll give maybe two examples. State of Virginia, we ran their water assistance program. So we go find out who's on SNAP, who's on different programs. We go get their utility information, and we're able to send you a text message and say, you qualify for this program, please click this link. Which is why I joked about the text message, because when you get that message, like, you should be getting money from the government, click here, it does feel a little, it feels great, but it feels a little shocking. And in that, and we've given out $200 million. And in some places, it looks like the state of Washington, we're working on climate credits, $200. 1 in 4 families will get those climate credits on their utility bill. And so that's actually where you see a lot of our revenue growth is not through payment plans continue to grow, but our work on aid in state governments is actually the largest part of our revenue as a company right now.
That's so interesting. And it leads into a quote actually from Van Jones, who you worked with, or how did you work with Van Jones? He's known on CNN, but there was a Prince connection there?
No, so I've known him forever. He used to be the executive director of a nonprofit in Oakland. And it's funny because we met many years ago, and at the time he was like, you're so harsh. All you care, like, he was harsh, and he was like very progressive and young. And I like was in the labor room in politics, and I was like, you have to measure results. Like, it has to be much more pragmatic at the time. But I known him for a long, long time.
Okay, so Amy spoke with him for her story, and he said, about the work that you did with Prince, because you helped Prince get rights to his master recordings. And he had said, Phaedra forced the powers that be to relent. And I'm wondering, is that a mission statement for what you're doing with Promise? Are you trying to change an industry here?
Yeah, it's a one. Thank you to Van. It is. I actually think people want to do well, right? Like, we have pretty diverse clients, everyone from Republican to Democratic governors to utilities, like in our local work. And my belief is most people want government to be more efficient. I happen to come to it from a justice perspective, but it is really, most people want government to work better. But I do think that government is not evolving quickly enough. It's not. And I think there's some places like digital driver's licenses as an example, where because of a digital wallet, people are going to have to figure stuff out. But I definitely see my job as to make institutions accountable to the people that rely on them, and to do it in a way that is beautiful and that gives people both grace and dignity. But yeah, absolutely. Because the one thing that drives me insane is in the defense industry, no one thinks that government should like go build planes themselves. No one thinks that government should run certain parts. We should have the same expectation on health and human services. It should run the most effective, and we should expect that it does. And that's what we are building as a company, is the expectation that the things that technology should do, it should do well, and we should build it, and we should make that investment.
Are you seeing copycat competitors come in and do what you do? And or if not, would you welcome competitors to the space?
Yeah, it's so funny. One of these companies just launched a product called Promise to Pay, which was hysterical. But we definitely see competitors. And an investor actually emailed me this morning and said, someone just people literally just cut and paste your material. And I think the thing that is good about that, the big competitors, the large SaaS companies and enterprise companies, I don't worry so much about them because the product's still really poor and it takes so much for them to shift, right? They can't shift as easily. The smaller startups or the companies that exist in the space that just copy our language and then trash you, which is always shocking, because one of the clients were about to go before an agency to have the vote on the contract. The current provider was like, they're horrible. We've never met them ever, right? They're horrible. And they can't give any examples, right? So they're just like, oh, people don't like them. And it was, and we are launching a product called Promise to Pay. So we were like, okay, got it. But I think that's what people do. And the thing I try to remind myself, competitors will make our product better. It will make us have to be quicker. It will make us have to deliver better. It's putting pressure on me to feel like we got to build a stronger sales team so that we can be selling. Like, we can't just build the most beautiful, perfect product. And so I like it, because before I've mostly in my mind been competitive with defense contractors, where I'm just like, okay, how are they growing this quickly? Okay, I gotta be quicker than this company grew. I gotta be, faster. So the good part about competitors is it excites me, which I'm not sure is healthy, but I'm just like, yeah, it just drives something in me where I'm like, great, now we got to beat those people.
I don't know. I think competition can fuel growth. And on that note, we're sitting here in August 2024, a few months out from the presidential election. A lot can happen that will affect the governments that you work with. If we were to speak 1 year from today, what do you expect to be able to tell me that Promise has accomplished?
Yeah, I expect to be able to say we are running government programs in pretty diverse states. Those programs have changed the application flow, because it doesn't make sense that governments ask the same information from people over and over and over again, and that they don't have a way to manage fraud. At this point, the idea that there's investigators, when you could actually use AI or other tools to evaluate documents instead of having kind of investigators going out to people's door. And so my expectation is that we will increase the amount of people we're able to build beautiful but accountable programs that are efficient for government. And that I'll be able to say to you that we are doing it, that they are growing, the company is rapidly growing, and that we're really proud of the work that we're doing around payment plans. We signed contracts for large national utility companies that we launched this year. And so I think I want to talk to you about the amount of the market we're impacting, which is I want to be able to say we're in 30% of the market, and that's a really important marker for us.
Phaedra Ellis-Lampkins, thank you so much for joining us and telling us about Promise. And I do hope to check in with you in a year to see how much Promise has grown. But in the meantime, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
The way that we socialize have increasingly turned to like online socialization, the metaverse, like that is its actual final vision. But I think like it's gonna happen first in games.
Peggy, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm super excited to talk about all you're building with Ego. Before we get into all that you're working on company-wise, I want to know a little bit more about yourself. Can you give me a 30-second pitch to who you are?
I'm one of the co-founders of Ego. So I actually was born in China, and I moved to the United States when I was 2 years old. I grew up in Wisconsin, Midwest, went to elementary, middle, and high school there. And then while I was in high school, I joined my school's robotics team. That's when I kind of fell in love with technology and engineering and kind of continue wanting to pursue it. I was very lucky to have gotten into Stanford. And while at Stanford, I pursued a lot of my interests in research and robotics, self-driving cars, and AR/VR. Yeah, mostly, so the story behind self-driving cars was I was a really bad driver when I was like 15 and a half years old. And I got into 3 accidents my first year. And yeah, I kind of outed myself on camera, but yeah, don't ever let me drive. And basically from that moment on, I decided that I would like automate myself and people like me out of driving, and ended up doing a lot of robotics work. And while doing robotics work, I realized that there was a big similarity between kind of 3D perception and environment in robotics and self-driving cars to also the AR/VR space and in gaming and 3D. And so that's eventually why I went to Meta full time. I worked on AR/VR avatars relating to the metaverse, and eventually met my co-founder and decided to start Ego. Yeah. And so that's where I am.
Very
today.
cool. I want to go back. You said that you kind of grew up being obsessed with the robotics space and interested in like building in that industry. Can you tell me like the first time that you realized that robotics was something you were interested in?
Ooh, I think it was like when I first started coding. Actually, I first started coding on a TI-84 calculator. There was like the basic kind of little like language in there, and my first game that I ever programmed was Snake. Okay. And then while I was programming the game, the person who taught me how to program on the calculator was actually at the school's robotics team. And then when I went there, they taught me how to use C++ to basically teach the robot how to throw like basketball and like things like that. And just kind of seeing like what I coded like actually show up in like a physical space was super, super powerful. And I was like, that was like the magic moment when I was like, oh, like I gotta pursue this. Like this is like my life's passion. Yeah. Like I want to continue doing it.
I love that. So you kind of started with gaming, went into some other spaces within the robotics industry, and now you're back in the gaming industry. Can you tell me a little bit about what Ego does?
Yeah, so we're making an infinite game with an AI 3D simulation engine. So what that means is that we want to make a game where people can play forever, and they can actually change the game as they play it with natural language. So AI has gotten to the point where you can now create entire like worlds, stories, characters with just natural language, and you don't have to know how to code. And what's even more interesting is that now these agents are actually very human-like. So because the way that natural language works, if you add like the memory system, if you add a brain and reasoning system, and if you add actually like a perception system, and basically the ability for the agents to do actions and to write code in a 3D space, they actually behave exactly as a human, you would expect human to behave in those spaces. And that's actually one of the reasons why I think I started with robotics and I kind of come a full circle with these agents in 3D spaces, is because you actually have like the same perception system, right? So in a robot, you kind of perceive the environments around you, you figure out like where this object is or where that object is, and then you figure out like how you know, you want to pick something up, or you see something and you're like, oh, what do I need to do to finish this task? And you actually do the same thing with agents in gaming.
Okay.
And so what's really interesting is that I feel like my stories kind of come up full circle, where it's like, oh, like the same brain, like the AI brain, like the reasoning behavioral engine that you use in robots, you can actually apply to agents in gaming. And so that's one area of really interesting thing that we started with Ego. And the other thing, obviously, is that the fact that agents can actually write code directly into the game engine. So if you find like a bug, or if you are a player and you want like this new thing appearing in your game because you're just very interested in that, your agents can like kind of change the game directly while you're playing it, and like make that object or level or map appear in game. And so we think that's really powerful, and it's actually like a new way of gaming.
Yeah. So essentially you're allowing people who don't really know about the coding space to essentially code these games, correct?
Yeah, so we want basically gamers who, I would say like 99% of gamers don't know how to code.
Yeah.
Even though I feel like once you're into it, like a lot of people start like researching how to mod games, they start researching like how to build games. But because they don't have the technical skills, it makes it really hard for them to actually bring their imagination to life. And so what we've found at Ego is like, well, if you can just code up entire levels or games using just natural language, and all you have to do is just like allow the users to like speak it into existence, or to basically type it into existence, that's really, really powerful. And so this is essentially what we are building with Ego, and what we're continuing to build today.
So what phase of the company are you at right now? Are there people who are using it? Is it in like a beta test right now? Where are you at with this kind of development?
We're very early. So we went through Y Combinator, we raised a seed round, and we're kind of focused on building a private beta for GDC next year. And so we have like some people kind of testing it, but I would say a lot of the work right now is a lot of R&D, and just like having the internal team test it and make sure that we're able to use it very well. Because I think one of the things is, if you're a game developer and you find it like super easy to build games with just, you know, a couple words and natural language, then it obviously, hopefully, like once we start opening it up to other people, like they would also find it really easy, and we can iterate it from there.
How are you guys planning to monetize Ego once you are like to the public?
Yeah, so we're gonna monetize it mostly through both the game and creations.
Okay.
So for anything you create, so mostly for like AI agents that you create, you can sell them on the marketplace, you can trade them with other people, you can sell accessories and cosmetics. So all of these things you can do. You can sell battle passes, and you can also sell games and mini like experiences inside of Ego as well.
Okay.
So drawing a lot of inspiration from traditional gaming economics.
Totally, yeah. Have investors like understood this mission of yours? What have those conversations looked like? Are they looking for other things from you guys that you then are building out, or what have those conversations been like?
We hope that all the investors who have invested in us believe in our mission, because I think that is, we were very fortunate to have raised a relatively big seed round and have a lot of investors who are very interested in investing in us, and some of whose money we couldn't take because that would put us, you know, as taking more dilution than we had planned on doing. And so actually, I think all of the investors who have actually invested in us do believe in a mission. And yeah, we actually really love working with them. And so it's a great opportunity.
So who is your target user base for?
Just gamers, people who like to play games, people who are consumers, people who just really, really like games.
Yeah. In terms of your funding journey, you guys are a YC company. You said you raised a seed round as well. What is your pitch to these investors in like very simple language for maybe an investor who doesn't know so much about the AI space? What's your pitch of why you guys are worth investing in?
Yeah, so I think like one of the main things that we pitched was that in kind of this age of AI, you have to make a game that's also a game engine. So I think a lot of times people are like, oh, if you want to make games, you can just like create them in Unity or Unreal or Roblox, and then they would just appear. But we found it actually really hard because a lot of people, this sounds bad, a lot of people are not very creative. And so the top like 1% of all creators make like 99% of like all the content that people play and generate like 99% of all the revenue. And a lot of where creators kind of like make these things come from actually existing games and existing mods. And so actually, if you look at some of the most popular games like Dota, like League, Counter-Strike, they all came from mods of previous games. And even a lot of the game engines actually came like Unity, Unreal, they came out of basically the teams building the infrastructure to make existing games. And so what we found is that like in these spaces, like a lot of people play Minecraft today, and a lot of people really like a lot of kids like kind of get into coding by playing Minecraft. I mean, I got into coding something different with Snake, but kids today get into coding using Minecraft and playing Roblox. And so we thought that if we build a base game where people are very interested, like very similar to Minecraft, something that's very creative, something that people can spend hours playing, and that's really fun, they will naturally want to continue modding the game and would want to basically, because these are kids and we're not targeting like Roblox age kids, we're targeting kind of older people, older kids like 16 to 18 plus. They're interested and they have kind of some skill set, like some creativity, some skill set, some motivation to actually play the game, but also use natural language to change the game as they play it and to be able to create new games and new experiences. And so that's kind of what we pitch to investors. And I think investors really like the idea that it's kind of a combination of Minecraft and Roblox. And it's because it's like Minecraft if you had like a base game, and then Roblox in terms of you can like create games and mini experiences on top of it.
Yeah, for sure. Why was it important for you guys to have, because you mentioned in your answer there that you wanted to have a game, but also a game that you couldn't build on top of,
right,
as opposed to like a software that people can just build their own game in and of itself or something along those lines. Why was it important for you to have kind of both sides of that?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of reasons. I think like the main reason is this is such a new technology that we don't even know what games built with AI is going to look like. So for one reason to build, before you can build the tools to do that, you actually need to build the base game. So you understand, you are your own customer,
right,
like you understand like what you're looking for in that and be able to build kind of infra that powers that. The other thing is, I think, again, like goes back to the creativity question, is that people find it much easier to remix content, like TikTok is a prime example of that, versus creating entirely new content. And I mean, right now, like if you go on social media, everything's kind of people like remixing content. And so we thought that the best way in games for people to remake content is actually to create a base game for people to edit and move on from that. And so, yeah, I guess like fan fiction is another example of that, creative writing, all of those things. And so we want to lower the barrier of entry to creativity as much as possible so that people can build on top of it.
That definitely makes sense. Do you have any predictions, like as you're deciding what to build, how you're going to build it out? Do you have any predictions about what the future of gaming is going to look like?
I think the future of gaming is going to look like the future of media. So that, I mean, I think the prime example is like kids are spending more and more time playing games. They're playing spending more time playing Roblox or spending more time playing Minecraft. And eventually we actually think that gaming is gonna replace in-person socialization. I think it already kind of have. Like people are, like kids today, they're like socializing on Discord and they're socializing on Roblox and they're socializing on Minecraft. And they actually hang out with their friends in their like virtual 3D avatars, in these like 3D virtual spaces already. And when we grew up, I don't know, maybe I was kind of in that like in-between phase as well, when people like would grow up on social media. It's like you kind of use like Facebook and Instagram and Snapchat, and you kind of use that as a way to kind of keep in touch with your friends like after school. And you like texting was kind of the new big thing. Like kids will, you know, start having their cell phones and everything. And so the way that we socialize have increasingly turned to like online socialization versus in-person socialization. And I think games are kind of the next step of that. Is it will replace kind of a lot of, film, like TV, and it has already replaced some in-person socialization. And I think in the future, it's going to continue to be like that. I think like Mark Zuckerberg's notion of the metaverse, like that is its actual final vision. Personally, I don't think it's going to happen in VR first, but I think like it's going to happen first in games.
Yeah. Do you think that's a good thing to be moving stuff out of real life and then into these online platforms?
I think it could be a good thing or could not. That's why I actually have on my LinkedIn profile that we're building a matrix, because I think like eventually when we're moving towards that situation, it's going to be very, very similar to like living in a simulation or like living in the matrix. So I actually don't know if it's a good thing, but I think like if people are happier doing that, and it seems like they are, then eventually that will be a good thing for humanity.
Yeah. You've worked at places, outside of Ego too, that has probably definitely helped you inform like how you're building this company. One of those being Meta. What are some of those like lessons that you've learned from those other jobs that have been implemented into now what you're building?
Yeah, so I think like robotics was like pretty obvious. Being able to understand like how robots think and perceive the world, and like bringing that into 3D agentic behavior and 3D agents that are able to perceive the environment in our games is really, really powerful. So just a lot of technical similarities there. AR, VR was definitely kind of so I worked at Meta on Meta Reality Labs, worked on Oculus as an internship as well, working on machine learning for AR, VR, avatars, and the Oculus itself. And so one of the things that I found that was like really interesting is that was kind of the moment where I understood that like the 3D AR, VR gaming space has a very similar kind of technology and to the robotic space. And so that's when I kind of connected the dots. Yeah. And I was like, oh, like what I built in like agents in the physical space, like robots, that can also apply to games. And so that was, I think, one of the most useful things I've learned. And because I worked on all parts of the robotic stack, I worked on like 3D perception, I worked on behavior planning, I worked on controls and actions and coding. And my background is computer science with an AI track from Stanford. So kind of getting that AI background and mixing it all together, like I feel like it kind of ended up by accident, but like looking back and like, I think Steve Jobs said, you always like connect the dots when you're looking back.
It all makes sense now.
It all makes sense now because like, I feel like my background actually like fits me quite well in what we're doing today, because gaming, even just general gaming, not even just AI gaming, is like a mixture of like many different types of art forms. It's like sound design, it's narrative design, it's programming, it's art, it's 2D art, it's 3D art. Like all of it combined is probably one of the hardest kind of art forms. And science, like it's a mixture of art and science to actually build. And I think like the same thing kind of happens in robotics. And I feel like I'm just like really drawn to something where it's like very kind of hard problems to tackle like systematically.
My last question for you is, in the next couple of years, or let's say like 1 year, you said that you have like a funding announcement coming out. What else is to come with Ego? Is there something you are most excited about that's on the horizon right now?
Yeah, so at GDC, we're releasing our beta version of Ego, which is the game and the game engine, and we definitely want people to try it out. Yeah. So we're very, very excited for that, and hopefully like the funding announcement drives a lot of traffic to people who want to try it out. So we're very excited for that. I think it's going to be super cool. So yeah, I'm very excited.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me today. This was great to hear about all you're building.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much, Alex.
One of the most exciting ways to combat climate change is to accelerate a customer-led revolution to technologies that improve their lives. It's nice to say, oh, you should do this or you should do that, but it's way better if we can provide technological solutions that actually improve customers' lives, and so they want them anyway. My name is Mary Powell, and I am the CEO of Sunrun.
The U.S. power grid is under strain. It's struggling to keep up with surging electricity demand, from AI data centers and electric cars to increased domestic manufacturing. The need for power is skyrocketing. And while large-scale wind and solar farms can help, connecting them to the grid takes years. But we currently generate more solar energy than we can store, particularly in places like California. So to maximize the impact of solar energy, battery storage that can hang on to that electricity is absolutely critical. Mary Powell, CEO of Sunrun, has a faster solution: more rooftop solar and battery storage units. Sunrun recently hit a major milestone, installing solar and battery systems in over 1 million U.S. homes. These systems create clean energy on-site and store it for later use, acting like small-scale power plants.
Sunrun is really so different than your traditional solar company. In fact, we talk about ourselves as being a clean energy lifestyle company. We are that beloved, trusted partner of customers, of Americans that want to transition their experience with energy, and they want to move to a more predictable, affordable, resilient way to power their homes and their lives. And we've really made a significant transition over the last 18 months to be what we call a storage first company. So we went from installing storage with solar about 15% of the time 18 months ago to 54% of the time now. So our customers are customers that are capable of really having that affordable, reliable, resilient energy future that so many Americans are really demanding now as utility prices have gone up and as the reliability of so many utilities in the grid has become more strained and that reliability has gone down. To me, this acceleration of the customer-led revolution is so powerful because it is also the gateway to all of these other technological solutions that improve lives and happen to also really improve emissions. Just Sunrun, what we've done already, we have saved consumers $1.3 billion.
In total, those 1 million homes generate at least 7 gigawatts of power and store 2 gigawatts of electricity. With electricity demand rising, rooftop solar is becoming a crucial part of the solution. The Energy Information Agency predicts solar power will be the top source of new energy this year, increasing by 42% in the second half. But the grid itself also needs urgent upgrade. So I worked at a utility company called Green Mountain Power for 20 years. The last 12 years of which I was the CEO of the company. It's really funny because it's the one when I was first offered the opportunity to go to Green Mountain Power and work for a utility, I actually said no. And reportedly I said no 3 times, the CEO told me, before I finally said yes. And it became one of the most powerful lessons in life of I didn't know what I didn't know because I had all of these ideas about what it would be like, and it was completely different. It ended up being like the most amazing opportunity to lead a radical transformation of a utility to become, as I like to call it, we were about becoming the unutility. We were about becoming innovative, customer obsessed, and delivering on an affordable, clean energy future. When I was the CEO of Green Mountain Power, way back in 2007, it became so clear to me that the grid of the past was not going to be the best grid of the future for the customers that we served, or really for any customers in America, that it foundationally was not built in an economically efficient way, and it certainly, as we were making the transition to clean energy, it certainly wasn't going to be the most effective way to deliver energy in the future. So as the CEO of Green Mountain Power, I actually leaned in hard to encouraging customers to go solar. Way back in 2007, we actually incented our customers to go solar, and we were the first utility
in the United States to also put individual storage units, power walls at the time, into customer homes. So it's interesting that so many years later, I got the opportunity. I was asked if I would be interested. I was then on the board of Sunrun, and I was asked by the founders and the members of the board if I would be interested in becoming the next CEO of Sunrun. And it was one of those things, like I felt like, well, you kind of had me at hello, because this is the type of work I've been active in accelerating really since I'd been in the energy business, but in a massive way since I had become CEO of a utility. As I joined the utility industry, there was a massive ice storm that literally took down massive steel tower transmission lines that were bringing power from Canada to the US. So that, on top of time after time after time, because I'm a boots on the ground leader, so if there was ever any kind of climatic event, I was out and about visiting crews, knocking on doors of customers, making sure they were okay. And I saw so many instances where we had just made investments to storm hardy lines, and then those lines were on the ground. So it was really obvious to me, again, that the US grid, it's a 100-plus-year-old system. It's not its fault, but it was not built for economic efficiency, and it was not built for climate resilience. And so while we were going to need to continue to make investments in that grid, it also was so obvious that we needed innovation. We needed technological innovation, and we needed to provide, just like you've seen in so many other aspects of our lives. I think cell phones are an amazing example, right? How they transformed, the technology that we now know as telecommunications, right? That the same kind of thing, the same opportunity existed in the energy space. So it was really exciting as solar started to take off, and then with storage, that really makes solar so much more incredibly valuable for the consumer, but also for the grid. I did not always want to run an energy company. I grew up in New York City in an artistic home, and as I like to say, I actually felt sorry for people in business. I thought it seemed like a really kind of low value, boring existence. So I call myself the accidental executive. I truly feel like I've landed in the situations I have because I love people and I'm passionate about causes. And so, I sort of fell into business because I didn't think I could support myself on my artistic talent at a young age. I was right about that. I don't think I would have been able to. And what I found is that my love of people, my love of cause, and my deep belief always that to do great things requires amazing people all wanting to accomplish the same thing together. And so that's, I fell in love with leadership and leading change, and then the energy space just became such an incredibly powerful space for driving dramatic change, expressing my passion for people and for providing solutions to customers. What I love about Sunrun, and when I think about the future, I get so excited because I feel like, oh my gosh, we're at 1 million customers. Oh my gosh, we're installing storage now over 50% of the time. We also have launched EV chargers, smarter panels. We're working on bundling products and services for customers for the future. And so when I look to the future, I love to laugh with the team and think, oh my gosh, it'll be so fun 5 years from now to laugh at how we thought hitting 1 million was so exciting. It is truly about being the leader in leading this customer-led revolution to a way better way to power homes, to power our lives, to power our transportation, and ultimately to power America's grid. Way back in 2015, as a utility executive, we demonstrated that by having storage and solar on homes, in homes, that we could actually reduce the cost of the grid for all the customers that we served. We would leverage those sources during peak summer months. We would leverage those to what I always said the goal was not to beat down the peak, it was to flatten and crush the demand so that you're spreading it evenly over time and you're making the grid more cost effective by doing that. So So it's really exciting that now, so many years later, Sunrun is at the scale where we literally have 16,000 customers enrolled in a program in California to help the grid for a significant period of time, leveraging all of those resources that are in homes, providing so much value to the consumer, but then also helping to make the grid more affordable and reliable for all.
I would say the net new American dream is being a founder.
Yeah.
This is inspiring because as an immigrant, like you see a future you can build from ground up.
Gökçe, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm super excited to talk about you and Calder and all that you're building. Before we get into all the details, give me a little 30-second rundown of who you are.
Definitely. Well, thank you for having me. This is a dream for everyone and was for me too. So great to be here. 30 seconds about me is I'm founder and CEO of Calder. I was born and raised in Turkey and had a passion for marketing and rewards because I didn't myself have a bank account till 18. And coming to US, I was very excited about the ideas of emerging rewards and marketing space, and was early in places like Robinhood and OpenSea, and started working with brands early to help their loyalty tools. One did really well and we scaled, and that's how I started building Calder.
So Calder is a company that provides software for companies, correct? That you
Yes.
basically allow your clients to create customer loyalty programs, cashback programs for their customers.
Yeah.
How exactly does the platform work? What are you providing to these clients that you have?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Calder essentially is a white labeled partner rewards platform. So if you look at giants like Amex, United, and Starbucks, what they did great for the past decades is they built financial technology capabilities inside their marketing machines. And it came to a place where they made more money selling rewards than their core businesses like flights or coffee. And seeing that, that was my first amazement about the space, that every brand in the world should be able to sell rewards and build partner programs. So essentially, we started building the automated tools for building partner rewards like Amex Rewards for any brand, and do it without spending millions or decades in regulation and tech.
And so in the process of, kind of what you're facilitating for companies, you'll allow them to create cashback or loyalty programs for their customers, which bring them more customers along the way.
Yes.
But how do you make money throughout that?
Yes, so we essentially become that partner rewards hub for them. And we charge in two ways. So we charge per connected account. What means is you can have millions of customers, but we know that maybe your partner, your customer might not be using that reward system. The moment they connect their card, we will charge for that user. And then we have a flat rate of a commission percentage from every time we make a brand earn money. Let's say we are processing $5 revenue or $5 million revenue for you, we will take our commission while we're processing it. This is also very different from the players we see in the ecosystem, because they charge per transaction and they start building relationships with your own partners. What we realized is brands want to have their direct relationships with their partners, in their reward ecosystem, and they don't want a middleman. And we were very transparent about it. We are very flat, and we are just a network. And they really loved it. They really started converting to use Calder instead of the other providers.
So when one customer comes onto your platform, then how many other reward systems or rewards can their own customers get? Is it, you mentioned there's a network. So how are you kind of facilitating what that ecosystem looks like? How many other companies or brands can then the customers use their rewards for?
Yeah, so to this date, Calder has 25,000 indexed merchants across our network in US, EU, and also across the world. And we do have global coverage that we're increasing. But every our end customer, so your loyal, let's say you're an airline and your end user would not see all those brands. It is the airline's job to invite partners or invite their own partners to curate that And that's also intentional because curation of a partner rewards really matter. Like you probably will not have a target in like Saks Fifth's program.
Yeah.
And that's why we also have this what we call B2B dating in the back end, where we matchmake brands saying, I think these could be good for you, and try to help them curate that.
And with these customers that you've brought on board, can you name some of them for me? And how did you kind of get your foot in the door to these major companies that have, hundreds of millions of customers that you're now facilitating interactions with?
Yeah, definitely. We focus on working with leading airlines, hospitality groups, retailers, emerging banks, and sports teams. And we started with sports teams because a lot of sports teams were excited to earn revenue and reward their fans day to day. What we do is essentially, if your brand has a lot of like customers that are loyalty and want to earn your existing loyalty points, then you're probably fit for Calder. So we provide the backend for them to add partners and like customers to link their card. And the first time what worked for us is to directly be able to go to a grocer or a sports team and say, look, you can earn millions from selling your rewards in the back end. And did you know that this is how Amex Rewards and United and players like Starbucks make money? Mm-hmm. And that was very exciting. And when you say that even from a LinkedIn code outbound, they reach out back to you. And that's actually how we got our first customers. And results have been promising. So we modeled this partner rewards program after a Portuguese sports team. Mm-hmm. And right now, with Calder's model, only with 50,000 customers, they're making 4.5 million every year. Okay. And customers are spending triple the more and engaging more because we started rewarding them beyond their app, right? Your customer doesn't spend your every day in your app. So you need to think about their journey and reward them.
In this kind of space, you're talking about things like financial,
yes,
improvements in financial rewards, some, back-end tech systems,
yes,
but also marketing. Why do you consider yourself a marketing company when you have so many kind of different facets mm-hmm. of the brand?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we help marketers to not worry about fintech. Mm-hmm. In fact, I think that's like what changed loyalty dynamics today. If you look at loyalty, every tool will try to sell you a discount generator or a software as a service. But what you see is the giants are not playing like that. They're setting up wallets, they're selling their rewards. So marketing is essentially a financial technology operation in the back end. And sadly, if you even talk with like billion-dollar companies and holdings, they're scared of taking that regulatory and technological risk. Mm-hmm. And that's where we come in. We only serve to marketing teams. We only work with loyalty tools and loyalty directors. And we tell them, look, we are your fintech partner rewards program, and we are here to reward your customers and make you money that you never made before. And sadly, loyalty is notorious in the marketing world as being a cost generator rather than a revenue generator. And I think that's what we are changing for the first time.
What were you doing before you launched Calder, and how did those experiences allow you to build a brand like this?
Yes, so I am a designer and engineer at the core. Okay. So sales growth came to me from just like survival mode and understanding within the ecosystem. Before this, I worked at Robinhood, which is like the consumer like trading app, and OpenSea, which is digital like collectibles marketplace. And I was a product designer in one and an early engineer in another. And there were two things happening. One, I fell in love with the idea of capturing a user's journey mm-hmm. and essentially enhancing it. And two, that was my first time actually building in rewards like software, like looking at credit debit cards in my previous jobs, and understanding that becoming a rewards girl and started like everyone does this, but starting like trading and exchanging your rewards across point systems and starting to see how I can build the reward exchange network. And then last pivotal moment for me is I started taking the chance at myself. So I started working with a brand to help set their membership and reward system and say, look, you need to be different and you need to start making money from your rewards and selling your memberships mm-hmm. because you're not a clothing company anymore. And that worked well, where they made 3 million in a week from that sales. And I was just an advisor. And that was the time I took a chance for myself, left my job, bootstrap for 6 months and started building Calder.
I want to ask too, you mentioned your experience working with Robinhood and in the NFT and Web3 space, you've also had experience.
Yes.
How do you see those industries? There was obviously a huge boom in them for a while.
Yeah.
Maybe there's been a plateau in the past, couple of years. How do you see those industries impacting what Calder is doing today and the marketing and honestly fintech industries in general?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what we're seeing is that neither brands or the customer would care about the technology. It is just the back end. So like Calder actually has has incorporated AI or like every kind of word that like now is like hot in tech. Yeah. But what we see is we need to solve problems and we need to be customer first. What our brands care about is that they're making money and they're also rewarding customers every day. And most importantly, creating what we call win-win-win situations. So like your brand is winning when you swipe your card at a partner store. Partner store is winning because they now acquired a new customer cheaply. And lastly, the customer is winning because they just earned a reward. So I think in fintech and marketing, I want to say, is very much changing because marketers are now very much more analytical about their spend and ROI with customer acquisition raising. And we are seeing a shift where we need to see clear revenue opportunities from every marketing initiative.
So what's next for the kind of combination of marketing and fintech space? What are you projecting in the future, knowing that like maybe the technology has to catch up a little bit, but there is a lot of money being poured into these industries and a lot of innovation that is happening. What do you see as some projections for the future of this industry?
I think in the next 5 to 10 years, every brand will become a fintech company in the back end. Like they have to, and they have the opportunity to. What this means is now that we have the opportunities to democratize access for building financial operations on their marketing teams, this is a net new revenue in these brands' balance sheet. And every brand will capitalize on this. And we're seeing this. Like we have brands that have as low as 1,000 customers using their loyalty programs and as big as 70 million customers in our database. And the sheer difference is only because of accessibility. Like essentially selling rewards or like exchanging commissions were a big liability before. But if you automate accounting and automate the commissions, then the question becomes, why not my marketing team building partner rewards programs? And the answer becomes, yeah, why not? Let's do it. Totally. And I do think this is going to be pivotal moment for the next 5 years because then people will start thinking, why do not I have my co-branded card? Why am I not upselling and cross-selling more marketing-related fintech operations? And this has been going for decades. It has just been secretly going for the big giants that we shop at. And I just think every brand in across the world should be able to do this.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about the startup space in general. You grew up in Turkey, now you've been in New York for a couple of years, correct? Yes. How is the business industry different in those spaces?
Very different. I think if you look at US, I would say the net new American dream is in especially California and New York being a founder.
Yeah.
And I think this is inspiring because as an immigrant, you see a future you can build no matter who you are or where you're from. And I think I'm so glad I'm from Turkey because I was able to see opportunities and problems I want to solve and was able to be exposed to the stories from ground up. I never had to, there's the two startup founder funnels. Either you read stories and solve for someone or you solve for yourself. I feel like I was always lucky to solve problems for myself so I can solve it faster. And that's what I'm grateful for. But I think US is still the center of the world for building your startup and making your dream come true in for like tech, especially fintech.
Yeah, and you've raised around $11 million, correct?
Yes.
What has that journey looked like, and has that been different since you've been in the States, or what has that kind of trajectory looked like for Calder?
Yeah, so I was in Berkeley before. I studied there. So I had a couple years in US before I started my company, and the last year of Berkeley, I essentially started it. I would say that, of course, I was privileged to have the background degrees, and I think more than that, the network. The reason I saw that I want to be a founder in myself is because the moment I was in as a freshman in Berkeley, people start dropping out and building companies, and I'm like, no, I want to be one of them.
Yeah.
And I think I have the great ideas. And that's kind of started pushing me to try. And there's so many stories that people don't know. I actually started a company and exited it and failed so many times before Calder. And those were kind of trials, right? And even in Calder, we are so we are so happy with our lead investor who and our partner there is the one who built United Mileage Plus today, and he built the backend for it. So we have the perfect people on around the table now. But before this, there were times again, I bootstrapped Calder for 6 months, started trying to get the traction and customers, and being in front of the right people. The only thing I would say is it's everything looks perfect from the outside, and I think I guess the founders out there, everything always looks perfect from the outside to everyone. It's not. It takes perseverance and just survive through it, and then it happens.
What's been the biggest challenge that you've had to go through and maybe make a huge pivot or a change to the company?
I think the biggest change was that us essentially becoming we were always a fintech and reward exchange network for marketing teams to build their partner rewards, but moving essentially our infrastructure rails from blockchain to traditional rails, so we can serve banks and bigger brands in a more safe and scalable space. And I think that also is in a way a pivot, where in our first 6 months, we were just iterating and we were 2 people. And I think the biggest thing you realize is that, and especially if you're a design and engineering background, it's not only about design and engineering, it's really much about being thrown things and then figuring out on the way. And that's hurdle and excitement every day.
Yeah, that's the life of a CEO, I
Exactly.
guess. What are some of the things that you're excited about for the future? Are there any other big changes coming with Calder, or some other big growth opportunities that you're excited about?
Yeah, so we recently announced our, again, 7 million seed and 11 million raised to the state. So for us, this was a pivotal moment to signal that we're scaling Calder. So the new year, you guys will be seeing very big players we have signed that I'm so excited about, one of the biggest banks in US, grocers, teams that you guys everyone is passionate about. And I used to be a pro soccer player, so I'm personally excited about those. So this is essentially signaling that Calder is not going to stop until every brand team in the world has a partner reward with us, and that we will be global.
Yeah.
So we actually have big releases coming in Spain, France, and Turkey too. Players like Amazon of Turkey, and basically we want to increase our global coverage because this is really tied back to our mission, where we want to democratize access to fintech tools for marketing teams.
Wait, you were a pro soccer player?
Yes.
Where did you play?
I was I played in Beşiktaş when I was 13 in high school.
Okay.
And women's soccer teams were not common back then. So we were the first kind of professional soccer team, and Beşiktaş then became a partner to us too. I paid my way in.
Yeah. When you were that young, did you expect to be a soccer player your whole life? Did you always want to be a founder? What was your vision when you were in those spaces?
I think it's always the discipline about doing something really well and wanting it. I think, and also seeing kind of opportunities.
Yeah.
For example, I did equestrian before too, so sports was always core to my life, and I always liked to compete. But I moved to soccer because soccer was a taboo in Turkey, and nobody was willing to start a team. So I was like, look, like I want to start it and I will be one of the first professionals in it. And I basically recruited a lot of my high school friends to like start it. And then I started a nonprofit around it. So I would even say soccer is one of the reasons I tasted and understand what it is to be a founder, because I had to do like the 0 to 1 work of building a nonprofit around it. And that scaled very well. Like we got a UNDP grant at the time. We like scaled across 3 countries. So that was like, when I did that in high school, I knew like there and then, I only want to build things from scratch and want to solve problems I want to see in the world. But I didn't name it. Like I want to be a startup founder at the time.
Yeah. What's your biggest piece of advice for other maybe like 13-year-olds that have a big idea out there and want to be a builder in the future?
I think go for it. Like, and especially in the time where we have wide accessibility, like we are just one LinkedIn DM away from someone or one like MVP away from building your product. We have never been at a place where like building your dreams to be alive has been like this accessible and democratized. And sometimes I look at my childhood and I say, I'm like young, but like, I wish I had that when I was 5. I would have built a lot of things. So I would say like the biggest kind of understanding I had when I started this like nonprofit is people are actually very willing to help you and are excited. So I reached out to this person who became my co-founder at the time, and she already had a soccer nonprofit saying, I have these camps idea, can you do it with me? And I remember walking to her office on a rainy day and I just had to walk because there were no other ways to get to. And since then we worked together. She was at the time 35, I was 15. I thought there's no way she would give me a chance. So this is all like a kind of a long way to say, do it and chase it, and people are actually very open to help you.
Yeah. And having been a young founder and a young just builder in so many of these different spaces, now speaking about like the 30 under 30 crowd, what does being young and in business mean to you? What does being in the 30 under 30 community look like in your eyes?
I think the reason it is special is we like used to look up to people that are stern and fit certain demographics and categories. And I think Forbes 30 under 30 is always the leading indicator of people. What are the future leaders look like? So I'm proud to be representing one of them because I truly believe we are not like the age of leaders that are stern and top down and are just managers have changed. And I like to lead from within, do things myself, be with the team, design, engineer, and sell day to day, which is still I do. Like I everyday design, I like review the PRs, and like I'm in most sales calls and on a text basis with most of our customers. And I think that's the future of leadership. And yeah, being part of Forbes 30 under 30 is really being part of that, the change that's happening.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. This was so great to hear more about you and your many, many lives that you've lived to this point.
Thank you for having me. I feel very special to be here and yes, excited for what's more to come.
Me too.
Eren Ozmen has built Sierra Nevada Corporation into the nation's largest female-owned defense contractor. Eren is also one of 400 billionaires on this year's Forbes 400, and my colleague Monica Hunter-Hart has an inside look at a $13 billion deal Eren just struck to build a nuclear-ready Doomsday plane. Hi everyone, I'm Maggie McGrath, editor of Forbes Women. Joining me now is my colleague, reporter Monica Hunter-Hart. Monica, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
This is a fabulous story, and let's break it all down. Who is Eren Ozmen? How much is she worth? Where is she on the Forbes 400?
Yeah, okay, so Eren Ozmen, or Eren Ozmen, she's the 335th richest woman or richest person in the United States at the moment. She's worth $4 billion, and along with her husband, Fadi Ozmen, she runs Sierra Nevada Corporation, SNC, an aerospace defense contractor. She's got this really interesting story that I can go into a bit. She's basically a Turkish immigrant, so she was born in a really beautiful city called Izmir on the western coast of Turkey, grew up in the southeastern part of the country in Diyarbakir, moved to Ankara for school, and there she met Fatih, her future husband, who was actually, kind of fun fact, a national cycling champion for the country.
Okay.
I know, kind of wild. And then they, just met briefly there. They both immigrated separately to the United States and reconnected in California. Fatih basically convinced her to get a business degree at the University of Nevada at Reno. They went there together as grad students, bonded really strongly, and became best friends, she says, and then eventually dated. After graduation, Fatih got a job as an intern there at SNC, kind of moved up the ranks, became an engineer. And Eren joined the company a bit later. She was a financial consultant. And yeah, they actually kind of went through a rough period there with the company. They basically watched it struggle from kind of contract to contract. It was really struggling financially. Eren automated all of their financials, their financial systems, and was giving them advice, but wasn't really able to, I guess didn't have enough control to kind of get them to a financially stable place. So they were just struggling along for many years. And eventually the couple decided that they were kind of just sick of watching that and not really having the power to do much more about it. So they actually bought the company. They borrowed against their home to buy the company in 1994, for less than $5 million. Today, SNC is worth, per our estimates, $4 billion. So wild growth there. Together they own 87% of the company. Eren owns 51% of that stake. Fatih owns 49%. It's the largest female-owned defense contractor in the country. And they also own a couple of other companies as well, affiliates. They own Sierra Space, a space technologies company, which has a really cool project called the Dream Chaser space plane. We probably don't have time to get into that today, but you should look it up. And then DAG, Deutsche Aircraft Group, a German aircraft manufacturer.
They have Dreamcatcher, but...
Dream Chaser, yeah.
Sorry, Dream Chaser. I was going to make a play on words because you have been talking to them recently about a deal for Doomsday planes. A little bit,
a little darker name,
conceptually, a little darker.
Yeah, actually,
but it's a $13 billion contract that she secured, and you kind of have an inside look at what happened here. So let's just start at the top.
Yeah.
What is this deal? Why is it significant?
Yeah. So, okay. So it's called the SAOC contract, the Survivable Airborne Operations Center. So you're basically building or developing the next Doomsday plane, they often call it, yes, as you mentioned, for the Air Force, often also called the Night Watch plane. And these are colloquial terms, by the way. This is not, what the Air Force calls them. It's the current model of this plane is the E-4B. That's the official name.
Okay. What makes these planes special, by the way? Why are they called Doomsday planes?
Yeah, so, they're meant to protect you against a doomsday scenario. By you, that basically means, in the event of a nuclear attack or some other kind of national emergency, it would enable survivable communications between the president, the Secretary of Defense, and the armed forces. It's equipped with over 40 communication systems. It's hardened against radiation, against the electromagnetic pulse that would, in the event of a nuclear attack, short circuit electronics within range. There's nothing you can really do to protect a plane against the kind of, if you're in the fireball of the nuke, but in most other scenarios, it's meant to enable this plane to keep running. And so if you kind of imagine, let's say President Vladimir Putin were to launch a surprise attack, a surprise nuclear attack against the United States, by some estimates, a nuke could hit the Capitol in 6 to 8 minutes. We currently have 4 of these Doomsday planes, and they can be airborne within just a few minutes' notice.
I see.
There's always one on alert. And then I think the other important part about this particular contract is that they're not building a plane from scratch. So they're actually retrofitting, remodeling a used Boeing 747-8I plane.
Okay.
And this is a really cool plane, a kind of iconic plane, actually. So the 747, when it was kind of unveiled to the public in the mid-20th century, was so big it was known as the kind of jumbo jet, the queen of the skies. And if you, for example, did a transatlantic flight, in the maybe late 20th century, early 21st century, on a big plane, 500 plus people, there's a great chance that you were on one of these things. It had 4 engines. Which is not so good for current airline travel because you can use a much cheaper kind of twin engine jet now. Mm-hmm. But it's great for a wartime scenario because it provides extra redundancy. So if one of the engines is blown out, you have more.
Right.
So they're actually being retired from passenger use at the moment. So there are only about 50 left. But if you'll allow me, Maggie, just a kind of quick example, let's say you took one of these transatlantic flights at some point, and then let's say that, you experienced a nuclear attack. What you would have experienced is basically, radiation getting sucked into the cabin, you're breathing it in, you're not in good shape, and then that immediately frying the plane's electronics and basically careening the plane to the ground. So horrific scenario. That's the baseline that SNC is starting from here, which is just kind of wild to think about. They're taking that plane and they need to basically make that plane more or less nuclear proof.
So basically the government says we have 4 of these Doomsday planes, but we want to retrofit these Boeing machines, these Boeing aircrafts into Doomsday planes so we have more. Right? Is it adding to the fleet?
So the current planes are also Boeing planes, but it's going to be taking actually much newer planes that were probably made, we don't know exactly which ones they are, but they were some of the last 747s ever made, and retrofitting those commercial aircraft, taking them out. The current ones they just bought them from Korea Airlines, so they're currently being used right now to carry passengers back and forth from places like Seoul to Atlanta, taking those and then retrofitting those much newer planes.
So the government says we want to retrofit these planes. We're opening bids for a contract. So it's not a done deal that Eren Ozmen's SNC wins this bid. Right. So they're going up against competition, I imagine.
Right.
Who was their competition in winning this $13 billion deal?
Yeah, it was Boeing. They were the only other company to bid on this. And they were kind of considered shoo-ins for the contract for many reasons, in part because Boeing, the original planes, the existing Doomsday planes, they're Boeing planes. Boeing created these in the 70s. It's been maintaining them ever since. Boeing is currently making about $150 million per year maintaining these. Also, Boeing is it's an experienced, contractor in this space. It's the largest, most successful aerospace company in the world. It's maybe $78 billion in sales last year. SNC comparatively is $2 billion. Imagine it just won this $13 billion contract. I mean, it's such an escalation. So Boeing has way more experience in that sense of doing projects at this scale. It's also currently doing something very similar with Air Force One, the U.S. Presidential aircraft. It's also taking 747s and retrofitting used commercial aircraft. Or use those used commercial aircraft to create the next generation of Air Force One. That project is not going so well for Boeing, at least in some senses. It is actually losing $2 billion so far and counting on those. So that could be one potential reason of many that we can get into about why Boeing was not ultimately chosen for this.
Interesting. But ultimately what you have here with $78 billion in revenue versus $2 billion in revenue, Boeing and SNC respectively, is a little bit of a David and Goliath situation. So Eren Ozmen is really facing a giant, and she wins this contract. What did she do? What did she say to help her be successful here?
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's important to say that it's not like SNC is coming out of nowhere. I mean, they are still a large company, and they have been successful for many years, but they were really in this kind of mid-tier of defense contractors is the kind of way that the industry describes this. Boeing is kind of a tier 1 company. So in terms of what they did, there are a few points maybe we can get into. One, I guess, is that Boeing basically submitted a bid for this contract that was non-compliant, at least according to my reporting. That's what people are telling me, which means that the Air Force basically put forth some really tough terms. I'm hearing over and over the Air Force is a really tough customer. So they ask for, not the impossible, but they ask for things that are really difficult to pull off. In this case, there were 2 things that Boeing was basically not willing to agree to, and SNC was willing to agree to. One is the kind of relinquishing of an intellectual property rights. So Boeing owns the original design data for the existing Doomsday planes because it made them, and it did not give that data to the government. So it has basically been able to compel the government to continue to hire them for this maintenance work that I mentioned earlier. Again, like $150 million a year at this point. That's very common in this sector. For people to kind of cling to their IP because it can be this really lucrative revenue source for them. And it leads to something called vendor lock, which often it also leads to a really highly consolidated defense sector, which has been really criticized. There are lots of antitrust concerns about, a lack of competition, maybe overly inflated contract prices, which, the kind of burden of that is then passed down to the taxpayer. So Boeing wanted to do the same thing here. They wanted to hold on to the IP. SNC said, we are okay with not doing that. We would prefer that the government come back to us and hire us again to do that maintenance work because they want to. Voluntarily, they think that we did such a good job that they choose us, you know?
Right.
So that's one. There's also a fixed price component to this contract. A fixed price structure basically means that, there's a pre-agreed upon cost for how much, it is thought to, how much this contract is presumed to cost. And then if it goes, if there are price overruns, basically the contractor needs to assume all of the extra costs. So not ideal, obviously, for a contractor. That is the exact kind of pricing structure that Boeing agreed to for Air Force One. That's one of the big reasons it's been losing billions. Boeing said last year, we are not doing that again. It's also, had a similar issue with many other contracts. And so it's way more than, $2 billion that they've lost altogether. They have said, we are not doing any more fixed price contracts. We're taking a step back. That is simply too much. SNC, on the other hand, said, we are willing to do that. It's also important to say that that's not such a big part of the pricing structure of this contract. It is a minority portion. So the details of the contract are highly classified. We don't know a lot about them. I have a FOIA request out. I'm hoping to get more details, but right now all we really know is it's a minority of the contract. It's probably just it is certainly just for the production stage. So that's much better than fixed price all the way through, like the contract for Air Force One, especially because that initial kind of development stage is very uncertain. You go into a plane, you're designing something for the first time, you don't know what it's going to involve or how much it's going to cost, really. So it's a small fixed price portion, but it's still, that involves some risk. Right. So Boeing didn't want to take that on. One small last thing there is just that SNC does have decades of experience doing, modifying existing aircraft, integrating existing aircraft with new technologies. So that is what they're doing here. In some ways, they're a really great fit for this project. In many ways, they're a really great fit for this project. And they kind of doubly proved their capability to the Air Force by pulling bold maneuvers like, when they decided to bid for this, they went out and they went to the Air Force's backyard in Dayton, Ohio, and they basically, at the airport there, very close to the Air Force base there, built a conspicuously 747-sized hangar there, within which they would be doing this work, theoretically. So even before they won the contract, they built a hangar that was big enough to hold a 747 that they didn't have before, and then went to the Air Force and said, see, we are so prepared. We can start pretty much immediately. We are so ready for this. You should just let us do it.
That's like dressing for a party and then running into the party host at the grocery store. And
oh my God.
Oh, you're hosting a party? I'm so ready.
It's exactly like that.
A very layperson's analogy, right? But
yeah.
They were basically saying, we're ready. We can do this.
Yeah.
And that was Eren's idea. I'm interested in her leadership here because it does feel like there were certain structural and environmental benefits she had, right?
Yeah.
There are innovations that SNC has developed.
Yeah.
She showed she was ready. Meanwhile, you have Boeing, which has had, to put it mildly, some PR problems this year.
Yes.
And its own struggles. What's the balance, do you think, between Boeing having difficulties and Eren Ozmen having the right ideas in getting this contract? Is it more of the positive or is it more of the negative?
I mean, I do think it's both. It's hard for me to say. I do think that the issues that Boeing has had this year, maybe most infamously with the 737 MAX door plug flying off of the Alaska Airline flight, coming out of Portland in January. Although that actually happened after they were eliminated from this competition, but they've been having 737 problems for a long time, and CEOs leaving, et cetera. They're not in a good place at the moment. Surely that had an impact here. But I don't want to overstate that too much. I also think SNC has been, kind of coming up in the world for a long time. I think the idea of building this hangar was a pretty brilliant one. They've also spent $175 million so far. They're planning on spending much more and kind of upgrading their digital infrastructure. They have some really cool ideas about what they're going to do in building and developing this plane, and we can maybe get into that a little bit. And I do think Eren, had a big role in that. She and Fatih they kind of split the duties of the company, so they can, we can put this at the feet of both of them, and of course the entirety of SNC. Fatih is a little bit more kind of strategy and growth focused. So I think he was actually the one who had the idea of let's go for bigger projects than we've been going for in the past. And he kind of challenged the leadership of SNC to go bigger. That happened about 5 years ago, and then the team kind of realigned and started shooting for SAOC, this Doomsday contract. Eren is a little bit more of the kind of running the company in a more traditional sense. Maybe she oversees all governance. She's responsible for the financial stability of the company. So that's probably heartening to, she's a lot of, and we talked about kind of the early history of SNC. She's really good at making sure that, they're solvent, they're in a really great financial place. And given that this is going to be such a kind of difficult contract with lots of technical and managerial challenges and financial difficulties, I think she's probably a great person to kind of be at the helm.
You mentioned some technological innovations, just real quick and possibly high level, because I'm sure you got really in the weeds, but what do you think are the biggest innovations that SNC brings to this project?
Yeah, so they're basically going to be coming in and creating a digital twin of the plane, which is something that it's a kind of newish technology that's more common for kind of creating new planes, not as common for redeveloping planes. So SNC invested in this very early. They're going in, they're kind of scanning the plane, creating a series of digital models that are going to be stacked on top of each other, a digital twin. So they don't even think they're going to have to touch the plane for a long time, which will help kind of minimize contact with the kind of Boeing original design data, hopefully saving them money and effort. Once they've done that, then they kind of go back in and they create, so SNC refers to it as the equivalent of the studs out remodel of your home. So they're going down, they're stripping the plane down to the basics, kind of to the studs. They're creating an interface, kind of like the drywall, and then they're integrating it with a lot of systems that are coming from subcontractors, actually. So General Electric will be doing the engines, Lockheed Martin will be doing the refueling systems.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so they're kind of fundamentally a systems integrator here, actually. And then at the end, they will have the new home, and the blueprint for that will be the kind of data that they are relinquishing to the Air Force.
So this is just the beginning of the contract. It's over 12 years, is that correct?
2036, so yeah.
Is success, we've talked about the innovations and the things that they're doing right, but is success guaranteed, and what does success look like for SNC? What does it do to their revenue? What does it do to their reputation?
Yeah, great question. I mean, if they don't lose money, that's pretty good. I think regardless, even if they don't lose money, even if they break even, an analyst, Lauren Thompson, who's a longtime aerospace analyst, put it to me this way, this heralds the emergence of a major new U.S. aerospace enterprise. Another analyst, Kai von Rumor, said, they're moving up in the food chain. So their reputation is already improved because of this. They're probably going to get many more contracts, especially if they prove that they are more than capable of doing this. They just won another very notable contract called Hades, developing long-range spy planes for the Army, That was in August, a few months after winning the original contract. So yeah, they're hoping to basically just ride that momentum, keep getting new exciting contracts, double their revenue to $2 billion by 2025, triple in size by 2030. They say that they're already on target to hit those goals. So, even with the existing contracts they've already won, so that could even be potentially a conservative estimate. So it's a big deal.
What would failure look like, and what would that mean for SNC?
Yeah, maybe even harder to define. Many analysts told me, they don't think this will cause SNC to go bankrupt or to completely, fail. But it would definitely be painful if they end up losing a substantial amount of money on this. So there's a risk of, financial risk, and then there's also a kind of, this could go over schedule. And in the aerospace defense world, often projects do go over schedule, and they often are over budget. SNC is known for being very nimble, very quick, and good at those things. So, maybe that won't happen here. Hopefully it won't. But there's to some degree of risk. SNC will surely make it out on the other side, but it could be, to some degree a reputational hit, or maybe slow their growth.
Obviously, aerospace and defense is a highly specialized space. There can be a lot of jargon. I think for the general public, you don't get a lot of exposure to it. So what was most interesting to you? What most excited you in reporting out this story?
Yeah. I think to me, it's interesting seeing the success, the kind of unlikely success of a mid-tier company coming up against, such a big entity like Boeing. I think that's exciting. It's really cool seeing this this woman who's an immigrant be so successful in the U.S. national defense space. And then I think it's just, even though I'm very new to kind of the aerospace defense world, learning about how consolidated it is at this point, the fact that S&C has been so successful here so far, it's a big deal. And there was an analyst named Cynthia Cook from CSIS, the Center for Strategic and International Studies, who put it very well. She said, competition increases performance across the entire industrial base. So the fact that S&C is going in there, proving that a smaller entity, can have a shot. It might encourage other kind of mid-tier companies to throw their hat in the ring, potentially increasing competition across the entire sector, improving things for the taxpayer, for the government, for our national defense.
Interesting. So you mentioned at the beginning of the conversation some of the competitive concerns that people have, the antitrust argument. So this could be the start of a new generation in aerospace and defense, perhaps?
Exactly, yeah.
Interesting.
We'll see.
We'll see. Did you get to go in any planes? What was your on-the-ground reporting process like for this?
I did not go in any planes. I might have a chance to go on a Doomsday plane next year. I'm not even sure if I should say that. We'll see. It's highly classified, so they don't really want people kind of poking their noses into it too much.
Well, for your sake, I hope you get a look at those planes. I'm curious to get on the inside of those planes. I don't know if I'd want to go up in the sky in them, though it sounds pretty safe.
As safe as it can get, I guess, yeah.
Monica, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your story. And I encourage everyone to find it and read it on Forbes.com. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The government does things so slowly. This space is going to be solving some of the most challenging problems we have over the next generations because they can move so much faster.
Maya, thank you so much for joining me to chat all about Temelio today. We're going to get into what you're building with the business, but first give me a little 30-second rundown about who you are.
Gosh, great question. I'm very happy to be here. Who am I? Well, I grew up in Davis, California. I'm the oldest of 3 girls in my family, which I think is very core to my identity.
Yes.
Kind of started my career in the nonprofit space and then wandered into the world of tech because that's kind of how Temelio ended up being born.
Well, you're the co-founder and the CEO of your company. Yeah. Walk me through kind of like the founding stages of this brand. What did you set out to build? What were the first couple steps that you took?
Yeah, totally. Well, I think starting in the nonprofit space and then ending up in the for-profit tech space, I just realized, I will never call this an epiphany because I think it was actually a pretty obvious observation, but the world of for-profit tech is 20 years ahead of nonprofit tech because I think people just don't see profit in it. And so that started to kind of gnaw on me and thinking about the tools I was using in the for-profit space and how they could be applied in the nonprofit space. And so that's really where the idea for Temelio started. And that's actually also when I met my co-founder, who is just the most brilliant engineer I've ever met. He has a background in quant engineering and hedge funds, but always volunteered with nonprofits on the side, both on the ground work, but also advising them on their tech stack. And so he had also seen that same problem. And when we met, we were okay, well, the nonprofit community is enormous, and we're big believers that the best solutions are really purpose-built. And so where we started is we interviewed hundreds of people across the nonprofit space and ended up building out an advisory board of over 50 folks in the nonprofit community, and realized that there was a huge technology gap with grant makers or charitable foundations, which is the client that we currently serve. And so we actually, in order to build the product, co-developed it with that group of 50 advisors and started out with, if you know the design tool Figma, 4th grade level scribbles on Figma. And then we would spend 50 hours a week with these advisors, showing them each feature, getting their feedback, understanding where we were wrong, where we were right. My favorite question to ask them was if you had a magic wand, what would this feature do that it's not currently doing? Essentially co-developed the product that way until we launched it about 5 months after we started.
And today your product allows organizations and foundations to basically manage the grant process from beginning to end, correct?
Yeah.
How can you kind of walk me through what that process looks like, the different steps that you were hoping to help them manage and facilitate throughout that process?
Yeah. So the client we serve is the like foundations that give out the money. And what's really interesting is I think a lot of people that know of foundations think about it like a large scholarship application or a big, grant application. But in reality, a lot of these foundations actually operate much more similarly to like an early stage venture capitalist. So they'll have a couple of focus areas they care about changing, like climate change or homelessness. And then their team's job is to go out and like find the best organizations that are actually moving the needle in those areas. And then they go through a proper like due diligence process and reviews and contracts and payments. And then the only core difference really is that their goal is return on impact instead of return on investment. And so there's a couple of things that we really try to help them with. One is just, I think, your classic software play, so it's pure efficiency and taking some of those like mundane tasks like verifying a nonprofit is in good standing with the IRS or just collecting that data where we can save them a lot of time. But on the flip side, and less on the efficiency side, a lot of these foundations just really care about understanding their impact. And so a lot of what we do is like cataloging the relationships they've had with their grantees or the nonprofits that they give to, as well as like the dollar impact with those organizations. So that's like on one side of it. And I think on the other side, and this kind of maybe goes a bit further to like where we hope to go, is in order for a nonprofit to get a grant, it is so much work. And these nonprofits are filling out the exact same information in like a slightly different language, like thousands of times a year in order to get the money that ultimately allows them to do this world-changing work. And so what we've done on the nonprofit side, or the folks that apply through our system, is we've built in a ton of efficiencies just in centralizing their data and allowing them to kind of do almost like a one-click apply, as well as leveraging some kind of AI in order to say like, hey, you've actually answered a very similar question before. Do you want to just pull it in? It seems small, but being able to like hopefully save those folks a few hours a week ultimately just gives them more time to actually do the work that's making the world a better place.
Definitely. So while your customers are the ones that are granting the money, you're also pulling in applications from companies that might be looking for that money in the first place.
Exactly. So it's like a two-sided system where the foundations are the ones that we work with directly, but each of them is working with thousands of nonprofits that are also submitting information through our system, using our system to report back on grant outcomes, sign contracts, like do a lot of the collaboration that they do with those foundations.
Yeah. What about your experience in the nonprofit space showed you that this was a tool that was needed for both sides of the coin, really?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think my first time I dipped my toe into nonprofit space was very much on the nonprofit side. So I was applying for a lot of these grants and spending like hours and hours and hours a week, not only trying to find the grants, but then applying through these black boxes where most of the time you don't even hear back. And I think now knowing what I do know about the space, I probably would have gone about that process very differently. But just thinking about how amazing it would be to have something that not only would make that process easier, but could even do something like recommend foundations I should reach out to and kind of increase my chance of success there. So that was kind of one thing. And then interestingly, the job I had before this, I was working as chief of staff at a company called Main Street, which helps small businesses claim tax credits from the government. And they were doing something really amazing where they were essentially pulling all this HR and finance data into the system and spitting out like, hey, here's all the tax credits you qualify for organizations that never knew they existed. And so I saw that and I was like, wow, how incredible would that be on the grants level? You have like almost $500 billion moving into these nonprofits every year, and 120 billion is in grants, and so many of them just don't even know they exist. So I think that was on one side. And the other side was just really in starting to work with some of our early advisors who were literally collecting applications in the mail. And then they were taking those paper applications and like inputting fields into a spreadsheet to be able to do analysis on their giving. And so I think this is a pretty like slow moving industry. And so there was just so much opportunity to even take software basics and like really change the way that people work.
Yeah, and you're trying to innovate on a, industry that's maybe hesitant to maybe change or doesn't maybe have the resources. Like you said, some of them just don't have as much, financial resources, and people don't see that there might be profit in those spaces. So there might be some hesitancy, I bet, to kind of push the needle in terms of like making these processes easier.
Yeah, exactly. And what's interesting is foundations are incredibly lean organizations. So an organization that gives out $1 million a year probably has one person running it, and they're doing not only like ensuring that those dollars are actually having an impact, but they're also doing all the like boring stuff like IRS compliance and like basic reporting. And so the impact you can have, especially because those teams are so small, just really is like pretty amazing.
In trying to innovate in this space, how much is AI coming into play? I mean, I feel like across the business world, there's like a number of use cases for it. Some maybe overhyped, some truly could be like life-changing or business-changing. How do you see the AI space? How much are you guys using it in your own technology?
Yeah, probably unsurprisingly, people in the nonprofit space are really, I think, nervous about AI.
Yeah.
I think especially as it relates to any sort of like misinformation or negative impact on the business. I think something that we've been trying to do is really like nudge people to be a bit more comfortable, especially with AI tools that just aren't scary. So for example, on the applicant side of our system, I was mentioning that we like use AI to auto suggest recommended answers. And with that, like all we're pulling from is data that that nonprofit has already provided to us. So, you know, we're not pulling from an outside language model. We're not doing anything scary. It's just like using efficiency that that organization essentially already generated on its own. And then similarly, on the foundation side, we're using AI to like generate summaries of grant applications or generate summaries for like a board recommendation. Again, only leveraging data that we already have inside the system and that that foundation already owns. And so it's been really interesting to see kind of actually been really surprised by the receptiveness of it, just because we've been able to explain like, hey, this thing isn't scary. The data already exists within your system. You're just like using it to make faster decisions and maybe even more informed decisions. And so that's really where we started. And I think like our end goal we'd love to use the data in our system to be able to like recommend nonprofits to our foundations or recommend foundations to the nonprofits in our system. And we're not there yet, but I think we really want to make sure we're bringing our like clients along with us. And so we've started like with the low-hanging fruit.
Definitely.
Yeah.
What about Temelio's, you know, software or technology is different from what exists today?
Great question. So many things. I think, while this might seem like silly, it is a lot prettier.
Yeah. I mean, that can make a big difference.
It's so much prettier.
Yeah, in user experience, in ease of, you know, access, those sorts of
things. So like people like can log in and actually know where to find information. Like a lot of the existing systems are one that like our primary competitor was founded in 1980 and went from being like the first player in the space, on-prem software, migrated to the cloud, like acquired all these companies. So everything's very like piecemeal. Yeah. And so like, not to get too much into like the data nerd of it all, but like a lot of the actual data models that build these other systems aren't actually allowing foundations to understand their business. So things as simple as like for example, we have a client that really cares about funding organizations where the demographics of the leadership are really diverse. And so in another system, it's impossible to see, well, how many dollars have we given to organizations with a leader of color because of the way that the system architecture is. And for us, we usually prioritize that ease of like insights and ease of use. I think we're definitely the ones like pushing the envelope the most on the AI side too. So I think that's been like a big difference.
How do Gen Z values, and you know, being a Gen Z founder yourself and just having, you know, so, or at least on the cusp of generations, but I mean, there's so much push for things like diversity, for things like sustainability practices, like you were mentioning too. How are those values in like the emerging generation of shoppers impacting what your company does and the interest in it?
Yeah, I would say I'm very properly cusp. I have a few millennial tendencies, I have to admit, but I think it was like, it is really just like core to who we are as an organization. I think not only is it important just because I believe it's important, but also like the demographics of the philanthropic space like are very diverse, and it's really important that our team reflect our customers too. Like the philanthropic space is predominantly women, and I want people to like see themselves in us. And so I think that's one thing that's really important. And I think like, this sounds so cheesy, but when my co-founder and I developed our company values, like that was just like a thread through all of it. Like we have, one of our company values is around like embedding empathy in everything you do. And so like, we really try to not only like listen to our team, but also listen to our clients in the space and make sure that's reflected. we have one value that's one team, one dream, which is so cheesy, but also trying to like make sure our team feels supported and that we're all like kind of going towards the same goals. And so, yeah, I think we like really make an effort to embed that, like not only diversity of background, but also diversity of thought in everything we do.
Yeah, definitely. What would you say is the future of the social impact space, the impact investing space, and the grant space in general? Like, where do you see this industry going in the future, in the next couple of years?
Such a good question. I mean, I think there's a couple of themes we're seeing. I think something someone said to me a while ago that really resonated, one of our clients, is they were like, the government does things so slowly, and foundations like have the power to do what the government can't do because they can move so much faster and like deploy capital so much faster. So I think like broadly speaking, this space is going to be like solving some of the most challenging problems we have over the next generation. So I feel like they're gonna have an enormous impact on how we think about and tackle climate change. They're gonna be the ones that are like understanding like truly preventative measures for homelessness in the country. Like they're the ones that can kind of innovate fastest because they're not regulated in the same way that like government programs are. And so I think like we're going to be leaning on them a lot more in the coming years than we have in the past, which is nerve-wracking, but it's also really exciting. So I think that's like on the broad level where like a big theme I see. And I think in terms of the more like minutia of what we do, I would love to get to a place where like technology does enable nonprofits to like access grant funding faster and more easily, and like allow something like the way we have a common application in college, like a common app for nonprofits, these foundations, and really be able to like deploy funds not only faster, but in a way that's like actually based in data and informed decision making. So I think if you think about the $120 billion that's moving through these foundations every year, like if we can optimize that for what's actually having the most impact, like the impact on the world is like really, can be really incredible.
And you guys have also raised money yourself, around $4 million in funding, correct? Why did you guys want to bring on that funding? What's that gone towards?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think like the biggest thing for us was creating really high quality tech, and we really wanted to be able to hire the best people in the software space. And so most of our funding goes towards like hiring really, really good people. And that's like really the why behind it. Most of our cash is just personnel costs. And then we'll go to conferences every now and again and stuff. But really goes towards like hiring the best people in the software space and being able to bring on like the best advisors in the philanthropic space and compensate them accordingly. And that's really most of where it's gone.
I think that there's a trend recently too in the startup space that, you know, venture capital and other forms of investment like that have been obviously for the past, you know, couple of decades a major source of financial support. And recently I feel like there's been a little bit of shift away, maybe towards grants, maybe towards something else. What would you say to founders or startups right now that are building in terms of deciding like what is the right route to go down if we need some financial support?
I think this is such a great question, especially because in my last role, it was the beginning stages of that role. Was very much in like the VC bubble where it was really easy to raise funds. And I think while that is nice, it also has a lot of negative downstream impacts in the way that it like causes startups to try and grow at all costs. Like that's not always the best choice for the customer or the team. And so in a weird way, I actually think this environment is one of the best ones to be building in, because it really forces you to genuinely have product market fit. I do strongly believe that if you have a good product and there is a market need, like you will be able to raise money. It might not be to the tune of tens of millions of dollars, but you'll be able to bring in the capital you need to actually grow the business sustainably, which I do think at the end of the day is the best impact for the customer, which is ultimately what you're trying to serve. And so I don't know, I feel like I would definitely encourage people to do it, and it just kind of forces people to be, I think, a bit more thoughtful with the way that they're building.
Yeah. My last question for you is, as a young founder under the age of 30, obviously helping a lot of both legacy companies work on these projects, but also some, you know, up and coming brands. What do you think being a young founder means to you? I'm sure there are, you know, pros and cons to being a young one in this space, but kind of what does that identity mean in your eyes?
Yeah. I mean, I think initially it was definitely something that's a challenge in our space as an industry that really focuses on tradition and the status quo. And so I really just feel so grateful to the people that kind of helped bring us into those spaces, which is mostly our advisors. But I think at the same time, like being a younger founder, just like kind of like widens what feels possible. And I think like my co-founder's around my age as well. And I think we just both have such a broad sense of like what we can do versus some of our competitors in the space having done this for, 40 years are very much stuck on like, okay, well, let's just march down this like very linear path.
It's done.
Yeah. And so I think it just gives you like a creativity. And I think it's also something I really admire about Gen Z is I think some people can be very frustrated by how like unstructured they are or like they kind of like march to be their own drum. But I actually think it's that type of creativity that like allows you to find better solutions. And so I think like I definitely have a little bit of that in me. That very much makes me excited to be like a younger founder in this space. But yeah, and I do think at the end of the day, like I love being a founder. I love like working in software. But also like it's the people that we actually are building for that are the ones moving the needle and changing the world. I feel like we're just this like tiny little connector in the impact space. And so it's just like really an honor to be able to play that tiny role.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm super excited that we got to chat a little bit more.
Yeah, it was great being here.